Welcome to Office Hours, Day 2 of our NAMM coverage. We're happy to have you join us for the next few hours as we go through all the different kind of products and all the different kind of vendors that we're going to be able to meet today on the floor. The floor will open in about 1 hour from now. So we're going to be able to have a conversation with our guys on the team, and we'll be able to have all those other kind of things happen as well, where we actually speak to all of our panelists here as well. So we've got a lot of faces from yesterday and a few new faces as well on our panel. So if we can go to a grid view, we can show all our panelists currently that are here, and so we can say hello to them. And we'll also be able to have a conversation right now, so we can actually talk about what we actually saw yesterday and our thoughts of what we saw yesterday and what we hope to see today. So for our panelists, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and if you have any questions for our Mukana producers, make sure you go into Mukana and use the tags appropriate to where you want the question to go. So we have questions going out to the field, and we have questions here for our panelists here in the studio as well, and we can have questions going to particular manufacturers. So you'll see manufacturer tags in there as well, so you can direct questions that way as well. So we'll go to any comments we have from the panelists. So we'll go to you first, Bill Davis.
I just thought yesterday was really fun to watch. I mean, I really had a good time. I was on the panel, but I was also kind of watching coverage in our monitor system, and the fact that we were able to direct questions from people in Mukana and have George out in the field ask people something that we had put in online is an example of the potential that this format has. That means literally a person from any part of the planet in real time can get a question into somebody on a show floor in terms of virtual coverage. And I can't think of another circumstance where I've seen that happen before. This looks like a tiny window opening up into the future of what event coverage might look like.
Yeah, so I felt that yesterday's show was very smooth as far as how we were able to talk here on the panel. We were able to answer Mukana questions here on the panel, but then also be able to transfer straight out to the field team and have them be able to see the Mukana questions in real time. And even the interviewees being able to see those questions in text. So the interviewees can actually see your questions coming up before they even get the chance to actually ask them. So it's very cool that we can actually have that kind of connectivity between our producers in the background and our field team and the people we're interviewing out in the field as well. So what we're really hoping for today is also to be able to get out to some manufacturers. So when we do get to those manufacturers, don't feel like you don't have a chance. If you put your questions in, we'll be able to get those questions right up to the top of the list, so we can get those to the manufacturers as well. So don't feel like you've missed an opportunity, because there's a lot of questions in Mukana. If you tag your question with that particular manufacturer that we're currently at, our team in the background will actually make sure that those questions will get priority, because we're currently at that booth. So also today, we hopefully will be able to get a chance to actually chat with our field team as well. A bit of a two-way communication if we can, if it's in a relatively quiet spot. So our panelists will be able to have a chance to actually speak to our field team and ask them any questions about how the day's going there as well. So if anyone else on the panel wants to have a little chime in and talk about anything they want to see today or anything they felt they saw yesterday. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm super excited because I see potential here. I think we're still missing a secret ingredient here, because I want to see more activity. Show paradigm is 50 years old. The internet is a two-way medium, and I want to see more interactivity. And this needs to be a lean forward experience and not a lean back experience. But super excited to talk to the guys at Audinate, and then that Focusrite, the Vocaster product is an interesting product. It's good to see Focusrite make an input gain with 70 dB finally, because all the other ones cannot drive the hungry dynamic microphone. So I'm super excited to participate today. Thank you, Carl.
You're welcome, John. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed by the fact that there are some major manufacturers that decided not to attend, Roland being one of them. And I don't know if Behringer is there. We don't have them on the rundown list, so I guess they're not there. And they're such a big part of everything that we do in the world of synthesizers and in the world of audio a lot as well. So it's a big disappointment to me that they won't be attending. I enjoyed the Yamaha piece that we did yesterday. It's even inspired me to go back and look at my 32-year-old Kurzweil and add upgrades to it and get rid of that floppy drive and turn it into a USB drive and add a SD card reader instead of a SCSI drive to it. So that's my next project now, is to update that 32-year-old synth to bring it up and make it a little more easier to access those over 100 floppy disks that the programs come on.
Yes, that's a good idea to update that kind of stuff, I guess. Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, no, I agree with Bill. I think we've taken a giant leap towards a first step, if you will, to really getting this down. I think the points of improvement would be, trying to line up interviews ahead of time with vendors so that we have better pacing. I would also, in an ideal world, would have a secondary crew. So as one crew is traveling down the hallways to the next interview, another crew is currently interviewing, and we can go back and forth between those two crews. I think those would be a way to do it. And then for people like Behringer, who I believe is not there because, at least in the US, they only have one distributor now, and that's Sweetwater, period, end of story. So they don't need to be there to be able to sell something to merchants because they only have one merchant, which I'm not really for. But in those cases, I think we should still, we could as a crew go to them and say, look, we understand you're not at the show, but either go to Sweetwater or go to Behringer itself and line up interviews that way as filler content as well. So I think, again, we're making great strides to seeing how this could be done. Now it's a matter of a lot of refinement.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, well, I think actually Behringer they no longer attend any trade shows. That's their policy, as far as I understand. They've kind of stepped back from that and have for a while. But I did see a little bit of the coverage yesterday. And the one thing that I was excited about is how you got bandwidth, because my team there are on the ground and they're really struggling with it. So I think this is the only downside with trying to cover a trade show of any sort. Network is so important, and without enough of that, all of this kind of becomes a little bit moot because we can't get the stuff out of there. I mean, we've been doing okay, but it's more challenging than it has been in previous years. I think that's partly because we've got a UK team and getting data out over SIMs is more difficult, but in terms of how the show's been, it feels like it's been sort of smaller, which from a media point of view is always easier to manage because it gets a little bit overwhelming, and it's usually a little bit quieter, a little bit less hassle getting in and out of security and all of those things, which just make for less friction from our point of view. That doesn't have the same criteria as like a regular visitor would want, though, I feel.
Yeah, so it is a bit small, so that's kind of understandable because there is just less people there, maybe less vendors there. It's true. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Victor mentioned 2 crews, but there's really no reason not to field 3 or 4 if we can get the equipment package down to the point where it's really easy to move around. And I could see some producer at the show saying, okay, we've got 2 ready to go. There are 2 people that we're setting up in other areas. And even I had heard the show had been downscaled. I have not been to NAMM before. I was still surprised at the distances involved in moving between location A and location B. In some cases, it looked like we were watching, which was cool to virtually walk through the show, but it looked like we were walking for 10 minutes to get a camera set up. Now, obviously, that's going to slow the pace of the show remarkably unless you have enough crews so that you can pre-position and cut to them when. But that all seems now eminently possible. And so it is the power of the office hours back of house technology crew who's been working on this a long time, who has tested and tested and tested and are now finding ways to get in these difficult circumstances like bandwidth availability in the middle of a big concrete facility, that they've worked not all of these things, but a lot of these things out to the point where things can go well.
Excellent. How about you, Danny?
Well, I have to say, yesterday's show was pretty tight, and I was pretty impressed at the way it was, called and cut, and the fact that there were a lot of concern about the background noise, that how noisy NAMM floor is going to be. I have to say, I think the team that's on the floor got that worked out well because, the noise was there, but you can hear them clearly. At the same token, last night was a very costly show for me. I finally decided on which guitar to get. I mean, I've been undecisive between three different manufacturers, and safe to say, I think you know which one I'm going to get.
Yes, a NAMM show can be quite expensive for some of us. That's true. So for now, what we're going to do now is we're going to catch up and find out what the latest new offerings are from Zoom.
Buddy, it's George the Tech at NAMM Show 2022 in Anaheim, California. And now we're at Zoom. No, not that Zoom. Zoom audio devices. And you guys have known this company for years. But here's a new interface, actually a multi-track recording interface I hadn't seen before. Tell us about it, Caitlin. What's going on with the R20?
Sure, absolutely. So with this multi-track recorder, this is the newest of our R-series devices. So one of the main goals with this is it acts as a DAW without needing to go into your computer. So on this screen, you would see your waveforms and MIDI files. And then if you go here, it allows you to see your fader positions. And then you can record up to 8 tracks at the same time, but you can have up to 16 tracks in a project. We have also built-in drum files, so if you wanted to, say, write a song and get it started going, you could add a drum file, and then it's also compatible with USB MIDI keyboards, and we have plenty of built-in MIDI recorded sounds for that as well.
Okay, got you. So it's an actual multi-track recorder in its own. It's not really, you can interface it with a computer, but you're using that as a way to do MIDI more so?
You can if you want. You wouldn't be able to use the MIDI control if you were using it as an audio interface.
But it does that too. It also can behave as an audio interface?
Yes, and a control surface.
Oh, wow. So it's got a couple different personalities.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, cool. Well, that seems like a really super useful product. Like, I love the versatility of it. Tell us about this other little guy, the Q8N 4K. Obviously, we're talking about a 4K camera.
Yes.
What's going on? What makes this camera special? Because it looks like, is it a mic with a camera? Or is it a camera with a mic? It's hard to tell. It's got a lot going on.
So what it has here is, this is a microphone capsule on top. It's a stereo cardioid condenser mic. But what's great about this too is it's an interchangeable mic capsule. We sell different capsules on our website that were compatible with our previous recorders, such as the H6. Plenty of those would be compatible. And then there's also 2 XLR ports on the side, so you can connect your own microphones, or even if you wanted to send a mixer over as well, you can get sound from there.
Tell us about the video capability. It's a 4K?
Yes, so 4K would be the highest, and you can get frame rates of 30, 24, or 25. And then if you were to go lower to 1080p or 720, you can get up to 60 in the frame rate as well.
It's so interesting to have it be an audio. It feels like an audio device that can also shoot video in a way.
Yeah. And then also this can be a USB webcam as well. So if you wanted to get the audio and the video at the same time, it makes it a lot easier.
Super clever. That's a secret little feature I didn't know it could do. Very cool. Well, I really appreciate you sharing what Zoom has. It's really great. Congratulations on the new products.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So that's great to see. That was our field team yesterday, being able to get that information yesterday on the show floor. And we'll be able to put it into, so hopefully we can get some of those more video packages like that for us to look at as well. So I'm looking at that particular camera there. So the interesting thing about that camera is it has XLR inputs, it's phantom power. It actually ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of things we do. I'm just hoping that, I know that particular camera's sensor needs quite a lot of light though. So it's not the best sensor and not the best low light in the world. But as far as the XLR inputs, I know that camera actually ticks a lot of boxes as far as the audio quality you can get into it. So that's one of the best things. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah,
Well,
the camera looks. Oh, I'm sorry. You said Nick, not Vic. Sorry.
But I think the thing certainly from our point of view, we've looked at these things. It's all about whether you've got the clean HDMI feed out. If you've got a clean HDMI feed and it can send a feed out in a format that any of our switches or ingests can use, then really handy. I mean, for instance, in a report, it'd be great to if your presenter has one of those, they can hold that close up to the subject matter, and then you can have a sort of live feed into your local switch, and that would make a big difference, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Having that clean feed out would be something we could even use here on Office House, of course. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that was what I was worried about, was whether it has an HDMI 2.0 out so it could deliver 4K over that HDMI signal. Or maybe it has an SD. No, SDI signal. No, it wouldn't have an SDI out. But It would be interesting, and the fact that it does behave as a webcam that delivers both audio and video, and then you can have a high quality audio input through the XLRs into it is a great way to make it an audio interface and a video interface at the same time at a USB with its own camera. So that's interesting. The plug-on microphones, not that interested. If their microphones are usually more for capturing ambient sounds and stereo fields, as because of the stereo arrangement of those microphones. Not quite as interested, but the fact that they put the XLRs on there makes it a much more interesting device. They didn't say price points either. I wonder how much that's going to cost. And the other thing is the mix panel that they showed. That's really interesting, the fact that it works as a controller as well, so you could use it as a controller for any DAW is an interesting application. The fact that it also records as well is also interesting, and depending upon its price point, seems like a very interesting product.
That's true, yeah. So, and mainly the preamps. If the preamps in there are any good, that's another thing as well. So if you're going to use it as a recording device, but as a controller, that's one thing. Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I think the camera, I like the form factor. It looks nice. I agree with Courtney. The mics doesn't matter. Glad it has XLR input. I'm interested in seeing what the optics look like, both native optics as well as digital, and how big is the field of view. If it's too wide, a lot of these cameras tend to, just go too wide. So hopefully that can be controlled. So I'll be looking forward to seeing that. As far as the recorder mixer, Zoom has done this for a very long time. This is their newest iteration of an old product, if you ask me. I heard nothing innovative about the product, except there's some MIDI loops and so on. Yeah, that's a meh for me. And also, how many of those XLR inputs have 48 phantom power, for example? I'd be interested in knowing those things. So we'll see. It would have been nice to see what the price points are on both as well.
That's true. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, there's two things that while I was watching that stuck in my mind. Number one, I've had good luck with Zoom things. I've had an H2N or H4N since, gosh, it seems like it's been about 3 or 4 years now, and it always functioned really well. So I thought, well, Zoom's one of those companies that are a brand anyway that's coming out of the Pacific Rim that's really doing interesting work, and they very good quality for the price. The other part of what I thought about though was this now conflict between, we have two Zooms. We have a Zoom that we're on every day, and we now have a Zoom equipment company, and in the same way that Apple had that problem with being the Beatles music recording company and then suddenly being a computer company, there was eventually a clash in the middle as those identities, the lawyers anyway, had to do a major battle and come to terms on settling that out. I'm wondering if names like Zoom will have the same thing going forward, because suddenly Zoom is going into the video space on their audio, what used to be audio recorders, and you have Zoom in the video space here in web video. So it's the name territory is going to get confusing. How do I say, I'm speaking of the Zoom SB7, whatever that is. Which one is it? Where do I go? Where do I look? Which website do I go to? It's going to be interesting.
That's true. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I just looked up the price of the Zoom Q8 4K. It's $399. You want to know how much it was? And according to the website, currently, if you order it in the next 28 minutes and 28 hours or 49 minutes, you can have it on Wednesday.
That's great. That's great. Go ahead, Tom.
Just a +1 on Nigel.
That's nice. That's nice. Let's actually go to our next question. We've got a question here for our panel. So you want to go ahead with that one, Bill?
Sure. Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany has a question he wants to toss in. Does it have motorized faders? Did anybody ask that?
I don't think we did get that answer. We'll maybe have to read the spec sheet on that one to find out. Generally, if it's MIDI controlled, sometimes they can be, like the Behringer ones. The X-Touch has a motorized faders, and that's also a controller. You'd hope it would if it is a controller into a DAW, because you want your faders to reflect where your DAW's at, and that's why the Behringer one does have it, I guess. So, but that's a good question to ask, I guess. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was a price point on that unit, because that would determine whether or not it has motorized faders on it. But most of the Zoom stuff, I kind of doubt, because of the market that they're in, that they could put something out at a price that would be, amenable to the prosumer or just the straight consumer. But remains to be seen. I guess the motorized faders maybe are getting cheaper.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, pretty sure they don't have motorized faders on those units. I mean, those particular recorder units, they sort of started out as demonstrating them in kind of band rehearsal type scenarios where you could just kind of record discrete tracks and then take it into another system, maybe, off the SD card. I mean, it's a very utilitarian device, but actually quite handy, but just maybe not quite in the pocket. Zoom seem to have this habit of making things that are like, wow, it could be everything I need, and it's just missing sometimes that one thing. Like with the camera, for me, it would be like, well, I would like 4 channels, 2 mics and a stereo line, please. That would make perfect sense because that's how we record all our stuff at shows. And as far as I remember also, I think the field of vision, the angle is very, very wide. It's kind of GoPro territory, and I don't think it has quite as much adjustability as the GoPro does because it doesn't have that kind of DSP for the image inside as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's an audio interface first and a camera third. So that sounds like what it is, yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
The R20 is coming in at $450.
So that's twice the price of a Flow 8. You don't get the motorized fighters in the Flow 8 either, but you do get the recording capability in total. I always looked at the Zoom as we said that they could be used like in band situations, and the one that I've always looked at as records all the tracks internally would be like the Tascam Model 12, Model 16, Model 24. So that would generally be my own personal opinion of where to go. Now, it isn't a controller. So if you do want something that records and you do want it to be a MIDI controller for your DAW after the fact, then that's something that the Tascam ones don't do. But I find that the Tascam Model 12, 16 and 24, they record to a SD card internal. They're also an audio interface, so you can pump out all those channels to your DAW as well. And you can also bring those channels back from your DAW and use it as an analog summing mixer as well. So that's another thing to think about for anyone out there who's doing a bit more high-end music stuff and not just doing like production stuff. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with their R series. I know their H series is more the consumer recorder series, and the F series is the professional recorders, field recorders for motion pictures or television that has time code support and so on. And the higher quality preamps are in the F series. So I'm not sure what kind of preamps the R series is going to have in them. And at that price point, it's much lower than the F series units that would record 8 channels, and it probably doesn't have time code built into it. So it'd be interesting to see what strata of market they're aiming that at.
Yeah, so you're right. I think the F series is kind of like their when that's going up against studio devices, let's say. So a poor man's studio device, they put the highest quality stuff they can in, but they're charging for it. They're charging like $800 or something for the 8 channel. And then you're right. Then you got your H series, your L series, and your R series. So this one reminds me of the L. There was an L20, I think. The L20 was very similar. It was a flat board like this, a bit more basic though. And it does remind me a bit like that. We'll go next question, Bill.
Well, Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, kind of is following up on that. He says for $399, the Zoom Q8 N 4K handy looks impressive, but the field of view of f2.8 wide-angle lens with 150 degrees coverage, is that good or bad in the panel's opinion? And we're just talking about that. Is that too wide?
It's interesting to think of, like, is it too wide or not too wide? That's always the thing I've always thought about. Where this camera kind of sits for me, as far as where it can be really handy, is kind of in situations where we're looking at the moment, like in the field like this, doing these kind of quick field things. There are a few situations where you want this maybe as your wide cam. It's your audio interface, but it also can be your wide camera, what's called a witness camera. So I think in a situation for talking to the office hours group here, how we may use these cameras is as a witness cam in the corner. And then we'd use it, but it also doubles as our audio interface. And then we would have other cameras that we can sync up via sound as our B camera, or technically our A camera would be a different camera again. So I see this kind of as a witness cam in a corner that is your audio interface for your high quality mics. And then you can have other cameras used for coming in the other way. Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, and Carl, I agree with you 150 degrees. I think 150 is too much. It's too wide. And this is the problem with lots of these cameras that come out of the gate. I understand the manufacturers have to find a sweet spot. And as Carl said, for the intended purpose, witness camera, it's a great term. That's wonderful. But I think for the stuff that we're doing here, we'd like to have it tightened up or have the ability to tighten it up without losing quality.
Yeah, so that's the thing. We want to have the ability to crop in and do maybe like a over-the-shoulder shot, that kind of thing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, does it say it's a fixed focal length? It says it goes to 150 degrees, but is it an optical zoom? It's awfully deep for something that's just a chip camera. It seems to be a lot, deeper or thicker than it needs to be if it's just a fixed focal length lens.
Yeah, fixed focal and fixed focal length and fixed focus.
And fixed focus. That prevents it from being an optical zoom. But they probably do have a digital zoom in there. Since it's a 4K, they can probably do a digital zoom with a 1080p output. But
yeah, that's true. So, or you could do digital zoom after the fact. That's the thing. So if you're doing a record, of course, if you're not doing a record, if you're doing a live stream, then you may have to look, elsewhere if you want to get a tighter shot. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, that's what I was thinking. At 150 degrees, I mean, that's close to half of a circle. And so if you're going to even punch in digitally, I wonder if there's any facial distortion or something like that. Does this make people look a little thinner or a little fatter or whatever? And that may have to do with whether or not you like the aesthetic quality of the shot that you're getting out of this.
So that's kind of true as well. Yeah. So if you try to fill the frame with someone, like how we have our, how we fit the Fenwick frame here, if we try to do that with a 150 degree lens, then that's right. You distort the features of the face. So essentially you would have to make yourself much smaller in the frame and then digitally zoom in after the fact. Yeah. So you don't distort too much. That's true. Go ahead to Locke.
So I find it interesting that it has a fixed focus and a 2.8. So at that point, you'd think it would have a pretty small aperture in order to have a longer depth of field. So I wonder what's going on there.
So at 150 degrees, that would be getting down to like equivalent to a 35 millimeter camera, about 12 mil. Yeah. So I know 14 mil is about 107 degrees. So 12 millimeter wide. If we have like a Sony has 12, a Canon has an 11 mil for full frame. At 2.8, the only thing that'll be out of focus if you focus on infinity would probably be something maybe 1 foot away from the lens. Everything from 1 foot onwards would be in the hyperfocal distance technically. So, but yeah, you are right. It's technically there's only one part that's in focus. And the only other issue I have with cameras that are fixed focus is over time, if it goes out of focus, there's no way to get it back. There's no way to actually get it back into focus. So I know some people who have action cams and the action cams just get bumped around a bit. It knocks around the optics just a fraction and it's just a tiny, tiny bit out of focus. It always will be because there's no way to mechanically or electronically change that focus. Go ahead, Tom.
To give the folks at home an idea, this is approximately a 60-degree field of view at f2.8. So this is what I think would be a better selection.
Yeah, that's right. So it's something that's around 40 to 50 millimeter equivalent on a 35 millimeter. That's correct. Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, maybe they thought of it as taking as an audio device with because of the microphones that are mounted on it, and they're just adding a camera, and they added the wide-angle camera because they want you to put that cardioid mic up close to whatever you're going to be talking to, whoever's going to be talking on camera. So they force you into a closer, into moving that camera a lot closer to the subject, and maybe the fixed focal length is set to about 3 feet or 4 feet, so that you get a properly framed image and keep people closer to those camera-mounted cardioid microphones.
That's true. Yeah, if you're trying to use those microphones in the reel, that's true. So what we'll do next is go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to note, if you're using this and it does have that wide field of view and you decide to make it a selfie cam and hold it in front of you, watch out because your nose will become the size of a Grand Teton mountain just because of the distortion of that wide a lens at that close. It's a little weird looking, but sometimes that's fun.
That's true. Yes. Artistic impression. Yes, that's right. So what we'll do is we'll go to a video next. So the video was captured yesterday from our team. The video is from Digico. So let's roll the video now.
Hey, this is George the Tech at NAMM Show 2022 in Anaheim, California. We've found Digico. Not too hard to find. They're right by the entrance. And we're here to learn, really, I am, to find out. I've known this company for years, but who is Digico and why are you guys such a name in live sound?
Absolutely. So Digico has been around for a long time, and they actually came out of a previous company called Soundtracks out of the UK. So they date back to the 70s as far as building consoles, obviously analog consoles at that time, but they got into digital consoles very early on. So late 80s, early 90s, they were building digital studio recording consoles, and then out of that grew a live division. Some different people came in, decided to take it in the direction of live consoles. They pivoted what they had to live, and then we launched as Digico in 2002. So we are actually celebrating 20 years this year of doing live digital audio consoles. So
congratulations. That's how I know you. I know you from live sound primarily.
Yeah, and the great part is we still have some of the geniuses with us that have been designing consoles and mic pre's and all of that stuff for decades upon decades. So there's a lot of experience there too.
So you guys are bringing studio quality everything in terms of what you can do with preamps and converters and everything to a live room.
Yeah, what actually set us apart at the beginning was we were the only console doing floating point processing. So I'm sure familiar with that and the benefits it brings. It was important in the studio world. It wasn't as important in the live sound world just because everybody needed channels, they needed affordability, those kinds of things. So when Digico came in, they started with floating point processing, which was set us apart as far as the sound quality goes. So sound quality has been a huge factor in what we do. So from our mic pre's, from those types of things. And one of the other things Digico is known for is working with pretty much any other system. So being flexible enough to integrate. So you'll see a lot of people out with Digico systems. Some are just using the console. Some are just using like our pre's and our whole ecosystem. But some are using a couple of channels of a Sheffield or a Millennia or Avalon or whatever it is to give them that character that they need. So a lot like you would do in a studio. And so they bring, and we allow for that flexibility. We allow for you to be able to integrate with those things. So whether it's a Dante set of pre's, whether it's Maddie set of pre's, or whether it's just straight analog pre and bring something in at line level, you can do that as well. So
that's interesting. You guys opted to try to be as open and interconnected as possible, as opposed to building a closed system that depended on using your equipment. And that seems like it's been a good move for the company. You're still here.
Yeah, absolutely. What we have found is that the operator in a live sound environment has been asked to do more and more and more, right? So more responsibilities for that one person. So on the far side of this console over here, we actually have a floating computer monitor, and that's actually running Waves Sound Grid. So you're probably familiar with their system. So they have their Sound Grid system. So with that, we actually integrate the two systems together. So it's as simple as loading a session on the console, and then it's going to trigger the simultaneous load of the session within Waves. You create a snapshot on the console, it creates it in Waves. You fire it on the console. You can even select a channel, and it'll show you that selected channel in Waves. So it's really about, the demand for the quality of the show has to be at such a level nowadays, right? I mean, people want a fully produced, they want an all-out show. So.
Ticket prices have gone way, way up, so the expectations are higher and higher.
Absolutely. So chasing time codes, syncing with video, having automation, having those types of things go together is really important. And so you can't just create a digital console that sounds great and works in its own little world. You need to create something that's going to tie into a larger system.
When you talked about Wave Sound Grid, then that already answered one of my questions, which was, can you run virtual plugins and emulators and all that stuff in the board? Well, with Wave Sound Grid, you're doing that sort of, is that running in the board, or is that a computer outside?
So with Waves, they have a SoundGrid server that's doing their DSP. So actually tucked under our console right now is one of the SoundGrid servers. So you're always going to rely on them to do that. They do have a native option, but that's going to vary performance-wise based on your computer and whatever else is running. So we prefer that dedicated SoundGrid server to run. So then on here, we're able to run that as a standalone system, but still get the benefits of the full integration. So you can run it as a standalone, or you can tie them together, but it is technically processing outside the console. We have a lot on board the console, and we're trying to build more and more into the console, so you have less of a need to go to outside sources, but Waves, as you know, they do so much, and it's so diverse that it's a great tool set to be able to give to engineers.
I think of you guys as often being on tour a lot. How about some fixed installations that maybe, I'm in the Los Angeles area. What are maybe a fixed installation system that we could check out sometime?
So we have a lot of different places. So probably one of the most high profile we have is actually the YouTube theater here. And part of the SoFi Stadium. So they're using this console. They're using some others as well. But yeah, that's probably one of the closest ones and one of the more recent ones we've done. We've done a lot of stadiums as well. Stadiums actually, oddly, don't have the same kind of demands because they're usually just a handful of microphones, playback sources, and stuff like that. So in the far corner back there's an S-Series console, which is kind of our more scaled down, just a easier interface to use. And the price point reflects that as well. So it's a cheaper console. But that one we find in a lot of stadiums. So that's the S-Series. And then you're going to find houses of worship are huge. So kind of going back to what we were talking about with concerts and the expectation level of a production, in most churches, that has kind of gone on par with the touring world. They want that, chasing time codes, syncing with video, click tracks, loops, all that kind of stuff is going on. And, being able to tie into Ableton or other things like for playback rigs is huge.
That's awesome. It's really cool to hear that, just the way that the board's used and the different types of, market segments that take advantage of this technology. And I didn't know how it integrated with Waves, so that's really interesting. I really appreciate your time today, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Back to you guys.
It's great to hear there from George and our field team on all the updates from Digico and all the stuff they have in the large consoles for large venues. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get an actual update from Nick Batt. So he's from sonicstate.com. He's actually got a team on the ground there as well, collecting information and video packages. So you'll be able to check out any video on demand stuff from his YouTube channel for Sonic State. I'll throw it over to you, Nick, and just let us know what's happening on the ground there from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carl. It's been a good show. I mean, I think, like I say, we understand that, that numbers are going to be down. There are lots of international companies whose policy is, not to let their people travel. So that's why we're seeing some of the big names not showing up. I think it's just a matter of policy rather than a kind of leaving it high and dry or anything like that. I mean, it feels like it's been going well. I mean, I've not been there. It's the first time I've not been since kind of 99. So it's kind of, I've been living it remotely and putting all the stories up. But our team have grabbed a bunch of stuff. I mean, in terms of gear, I was a little worried that perhaps in our specific niche, which is kind of more synthesizers, that there would be a little less than we'd anticipated. But actually, there are a couple of last-minute late entries from new companies, which is always good to see at NAMM, because normally we see a lot of things come up a week or 2 weeks in advance, and we're just kind of, all we're doing is waiting to go and see it, something other than the polished kind of teaser or trailer that we've had over YouTube or whatever. So I wanted to name a couple of things. First up is someone from your neck of the woods, Carl. It's Nina, which is Melbourne Instruments. Never heard of them. It's a complete new one. And it's one of these instruments that seems to have been enabled by drone technology. So what it is a 12-voice digital synthesizer, wavetable synthesizer with an analog filter, but all of the knobs have got actuator motors on them, which means that they all actually move. So in terms of morphing between patches, recall patches, they all move. And it's kind of, everybody's been going, well, that's crazy. But apparently they really are quite robust and able to deal with kind of intervention while they're moving. We've seen with moving fader technology that's very advanced, not so much with the knobs. It's been the first time for that. And it sounds pretty good. I don't know how much it's going to be yet. I think I've got my notes here. I think they're looking to Kickstarter it, which is always a great advert. The other thing was the Groove Synthesis Third Wave, which is kind of inspired by PPG, which is an old 1980s wavetable synthesizer. You would have heard that on stuff like Propaganda, Aha, just sort of those big names, and there are many others besides. And that's actually really interesting. It's quite a sort of super synth. It's 24 voices, 3 oscillators per voice, wavetable oscillators, which can be in the old PPG mode, which is kind of quite grungy, or in a more advanced modern wavetable mode, or in a VA mode. So you've got, which gives you sort of more traditional synthesizer waveforms, but it's also got analog filters. There's a Dave Rossum designed filter, which is, Dave Rossum is the guy behind EMU and lots of really big kind of tech inventions. Lovely chap. And there's also an SEM filter in there as well. That's per voice. And each it's also got 4 sets of stereo outputs, so 4-part multi-timbrality, which it sounds like a lot of money, about $3,800, but all of those features, that's not a bad, it's not a bad feature set for that. A couple of other things. There was GPU audio. I don't know if anybody's come across those guys. They are sort of working on running audio processing on GPUs, essentially, and they're getting quite a lot of traction now. I mean, it's a kind of startup. They're doing it the traditional sort of financing and round ways, but there are some very impressive results with that. They've got an open beta on that at the moment, and I think they're going to be launching some more stuff in September, but some really quite impressive stuff there. Anything else? I'm just trying to think. There was a Crotus Audio. They make kind of sound effects. I think they did. I forget the name of the instrument or the software where you could vocalize the sound effects that you want, and it would read that signal and turn it into kind of spots for Foley or animal noises or whatever. They're working on something called Crotus Studio, which is a gestural based sort of Foley item, and that's coming out in September. That looked really interesting too, but a bit light on just the synthesizer count for us. But nonetheless, we've got like 40 or so videos up already, and then we've still got another day of stuff to go. So there'll be plenty more from us.
That's great to hear, Nick. So just remember, people, if you want to check out what Nick's doing over there, so it's solidstate.com, and you can also check out the Solid State YouTube channel as well. And he also does a weekly live show, so you'll be able to catch up with the weekly live stuff.
That would be sonicstate.com, Carl.
So sonicstate.com. So sonicstate.com. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cross over to the field. Our field team are ready. So let's cross over to the field and see what's... All right, so we'll hold back from the field. We'll just actually go to John Preto.
So I don't know who to direct this question to. I'm trying to fill holes in my understanding. I'm not sure I can fully articulate. But we've all seen the big consoles in the front of house, and obviously Audiotonic, which is the family that owns all the different brands, right? So you see the big Digico panels in the back, or Yamaha's, or whatever they're using, and then Digigrid is my understanding is the Digigrid a hardware integration with the Waves software, and is the trend moving more towards software-based consoles than... I can't believe the giant hardware panels still existing today, unless guys like Mickey just like to turn a bunch of knobs. What's the future there?
So as far as I know, because the Waves are actually trying to partner with a lot of different manufacturers. They have a Waves card for the Behringer X32, which is a very popular smaller console, cheaper console. And so what's actually happening that I'm hearing is that essentially they've got a chipset. So they've actually got their own DSP on these cards. They can go onto the expansion slots, and they're actually pushing in their software technically to run on the hardware. So this is something that Universal Audio do as well inside their audio interfaces. The audio interfaces have hardware acceleration for their plugins. So Waves is actually doing the same thing. They're actually pushing their plugins into this hardware environment, which can be an expansion card, as we're seeing in these consoles, and they're able to run their plugins in real time on the hardware and interface. So if you want the reverb or you want noise cancellation from these kind of things, you can actually do that because they're actually, the Waves hardware is actually inbuilt into the expansion cards that you're going into these consoles. So that's kind of, Waves is quite clever by adding to manufacturers, non-manufacturer specific. So therefore, as I said, like Behringer's one, Digico's one, and then using their Waves grid as well is another system that they can use as well. So that's something we've seen as well. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'm just going to stop back to Mixing Desk 101 and a moment in my life when I was, I think, about 17 or 16 years old, and I got a tour of my first console, and I asked the front of house mixer who I was standing beside, how do you learn? I mean, that's thousands of knobs. How do you learn what them all do? And he just said, no, you don't understand. This thing is called a channel strip. And once you learn a channel strip, everything from there over to the right-hand module is just more of those. So you learn one, you learn them all. And it is this addressability thing that I think in the modern digital era that has made these less intuitive. From the moment he told that to me, I thought, okay, it doesn't matter how big the board is. It matters whether I understand everything on one channel strip and then understand how its routing happens on the right side of the board. Now, of course, in the digital era, you can assign different functions to so many of those things, even in the channel strips, that one control can do, an unlimited number of things. And I think the complexity has increased logarithmically because of that. But basically, the simple thing was not that hard to understand.
That's kind of true. That's right. So we understand that our field team actually is ready now. So let's cross over to our field team over there in NAMM 22 in Anaheim.
Hey everybody, it's George the Tech. We're at NAMM, day 3, the final day here in Anaheim, California. And we have a really unique experience here today. I'm super excited and a little nervous now that I know who we're talking to here. We're talking about the pocket piano. And here to demonstrate it today, we've got one of the creators of pocket piano and an incredible musician here to
So it looks like we've had our feed dropped there from Anaheim. That's okay. So it looks like we had pocket piano there. So I have seen these kind of they're excellent kind of things where you can take them traveling, you can use them, and they work via MIDI, via Bluetooth, or hopefully the update is going to be Bluetooth. That's what we're going to hear from them. So has anyone here on the panel seen these kind of technologies before to use like pocket piano, which can, hopefully I've seen one that works with iOS in the past. So you can actually hook it up to your GarageBand in iOS and actually control it. I've seen rollable ones that actually, pianos that actually roll out. I wouldn't say they're tactilely nice. But there have been other kind of pianos, these kind of pocket pianos that you can actually have. They fold up as well. So they actually fold up into something quite small. So hopefully we can go back. So let's head back to the NAMM show floor in Anaheim.
Let's go. Hey everybody, it's George the Tech here.
So while we wait for the streaming gods to be on our side today, we'll continue on here. So what I'll do is I'll go to Courtney.
Yeah, I've seen, as you mentioned earlier, I've seen the roll-up keyboards, which are just, flat membrane-type keyboards. But this looks interesting in that it actually has physical keys that press down, it looks like. I don't know how it's going to fold up and fit in your pocket. That'll be interesting to see if we can see them folded up into the smaller version of that and how it folds and the technology behind it. And whether it's Bluetooth or whether it just plugs in as a HID or human interface device to whatever whatever piece of technology you're going to plug it into.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, yesterday we had that nice examination of the little module. I mean, a 1-octave module. So the answer to the pocket size is, are you okay to wear cargo shorts? I think you can get pants that have pockets that are so large you can hold a dictionary in them. So it's interesting to see what they've done. And I wonder, piano players are pretty specific about the touch that they like, and they sometimes pick based on key weighting and the rest of those things. And I think the really good synthesizers are probably every bit as good, if not better, than the actual pianos. And I say that only because I had a friend who was a piano tech for touring rock musicians, and the first thing they would do is get a baby grand and gut it and put fake everything in it, and then just put one of the high-end synthesizers in that, because it was impossible for them to keep pianos in tune as they were being rolled on and off of stages and onto trucks all the time. So they had synthesized the form factor of the baby grand, and that's what they were actually plugging into for the concert musicians to play. But Carl, you know a lot more about that. What is that still the practice?
So generally, if you're on stage, depending on the type of concert, you may actually have, like, if it's a concert in a concert hall, then that's different. You may actually be using a real grand, but you are right. So essentially, but Yamaha and who else? Roland actually make ones that look like it as well, and Kawai, they actually make ones that are the shape of a grand piano, but they're actually digitally controlled. Roland makes an upright version of this. So Roland actually makes looks like an upright one with strings in it, but it's actually a digital one with humongous speakers in there. There's another thing about pocket piano. There was something similar that came out from Roley, which was you could actually put an octave, so you could actually add octaves up. And it looks like the pocket piano one is quite similar in that, where you can just, you have to have one control panel, which is the left, and then you can add as many octaves as you want. So it looks like that's how it works. It's quite intuitive, and it's got a pedal as well. So what I'll do is actually, a graphics team actually has website up. So if we actually get a graphics team to bring up the website, we can actually see what it looks like by the modularity of the pocket piano. So as we can see, we have a control module on the left, then we can have as many octaves as you want, and then you have a pedal as well. So it looks like they've got there pretty much like an 88 keyboard. So we'll cross over back to the floor where we've got the streaming gods back with us. and assuming gods have gone against us once more. So we'll come back to us in the panel. So the other things that we like to look at here also are just the innovations that are coming out. So go ahead, Talok.
I just wanted to ask Bill if his friend, the piano tuner, lost his job after that, or what happened at that point.
No, I think he is still out touring. He was a really nice guy. He was one of the other dads when my son was growing up. We met all the rest of the dads around, and he said, "Yeah, I work with big bands and big television shows, and I'm a piano tech touring with these guys."
Oh, piano tech, not piano tuner. I see.
Right. No, he's a piano tech. That was the point. He couldn't. They couldn't find tuners or travel with tuners to try to intonate a baby grand that had been on trucks across bumpy roads for sometimes 2 or 3 days as these crews. Usually there's 2 full crews and they hop to the next stadium and then that one hops to the next stadium and so forth. And it was impossible. So his job before the tour started was to find bodies of baby grand pianos and gut the entire keyboard mechanism out of them and set them up so that literally within, I think he said 15 or 10 minutes, they could completely take the synthesizer out of the baby grand shell and replace it, swap it in with another one, and wire everything up so that the show could go on. So if the keyboard player had any issues, it's just pull that module, put the next module in, get ready for the next show.
So I know that Paul McCartney, when he goes on tour, he has like a small colorful upright, and it is just a case for him, and he puts in whatever stage piano he wants to put in there, and so he can change it. But if you're just taking looks of Paul McCartney on tour, you'll notice he has this nice, colorful, small upright piano, which is technically just a case for his whatever stage piano he wants to play at that time. So we'll go to the next question, Bill.
Next question comes to us from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand, and he says, Carl, Ibanez had a Santorini chrome guitar that my local shop had in stock for years, which eventually sold this year for about 8,500 New Zealand dollars. Now there's a gold version, and he's got a link there. Any thoughts?
So this is Ibanez's Joe Satriani's Silver Surfer guitar. So Silver Surfer is a famous song he did back in the 80s. Joe Satriani's a virtuosic guitar player from New York, and he's also the teacher of Steve Vai. So these kind of guitars actually do come up. I know that Joe Satriani does his own line. So this is his, and it's a very smooth, kind of looks like a bubble body. So he's had a silver one. This is a gold one, and it's probably an anniversary guitar. So generally he'll do an anniversary guitar, which I'm guessing he's coming up to his 40th anniversary from his first album. So that may be the case. I haven't played one of his silver guitars or the gold guitars, or the chrome guitar technically. I haven't played one of those guitars. I have played one of his red guitars. So he has a red series as well, which is technically the series underneath this one. But I haven't played this one yet. This is a bit too new. But thanks for the question, Peter. Next question.
Oh, wait a second. If you want to watch him play, there is an incredible YouTube version of him playing with the pickup band. And who is it? I'm going to forget her name. Cortez the Killer. Just look for Cortez the Killer, Joe Satriani. There is a live show. That trumpet player, I think his name is Willie Waldman, is stunning. That's definitely worth 10 minutes of your time to watch that. Sorry. I just had to throw that in because I've watched it like 5 times now because I'm so fascinated by that performance. It is killer. Okay, now we can get to real stuff. Douglas Carmichael, I've noticed that when there is a lot of load on the Mac CPU, the audio feed to my Wave Sound Grid network breaks up. Why would that be?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm not sure if his Wave Sound Grid network has the DSP on board in it, because maybe the Waves, if it's not using a plug-in card that has the DSP on it, it'll revert to using the CPU to do its digital signal processing, and so the heavy CPU load on the Mac is going to be competing against the DSP that Waves has to do, and so that's why it's going to slow down or break up.
Also, another thing you may want to check is your buffer size. So if by increasing your buffer size, it'll increase your latency, so your playability, if you're going to play in real time, may not be the case. But increasing your buffer size can actually help out the CPU as well as to when it has to do its job. So let's go to the next question, Bill.
Okay, but I'm an idiot because I didn't mention Grace Potter, and that she's the singer. Fabulous performance. Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. How would you have a foot pedal with this kind of piano device, or do you need one? Not a piano player personally, just curious.
So it looks like on the webpage, I actually do have foot pedals. Look like they connect via Bluetooth or some proprietary information. And it looks like you can add more than one foot pedal. So you can have a sostenuto pedal as well if you want to have that kind of control. So these kind of Bluetooth controller keyboards have been around for a while as far as the ones that can fold up. But this one looks just like an elegant solution, all in one package as well. So it does look like quite a nice little package there. But as you can see there, you've got two sostenuto or two pedals on the left here, and then you've got your control panel, and then your octaves you can add to it. My guess it'd be they'll link up magnetically, similar to the Rolly one, and they'll all have their own battery pack, unless the battery pack is only in the control panel on the left. But yeah.
My question is, when you put it in your pocket and you sit down, what chord does it play?
C major. Go ahead, Taluk.
I also look at that and immediately think of a problem I had last night where somebody's foot pedal for their music, to change the page in the music had a green flashing LED on it, and it is all I could look at. Why would they make things for performance that have these things on them? That just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think what I'm looking at on the website there doesn't seem to indicate there are any errant LEDs.
That's true. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to plus 10 on Tlaluk's comment there. I can't tell you how many times I've been watching a performance video or something like that, and I keep going, now what is that? Why is it blinking? What is it? Now it's yellow and it's blinking? Does that mean? And I can't get my head off of, because we're so used to that means something's wrong in the world of production, right? A blinking light is never a good thing.
I thought the whole time that I was in the last scene of The Great Gatsby.
So you want to hand that person a little bit of black gaffer tape to put over their little blinking light on their page change to pedal. We'll go to the next question, Bill.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, is up next. He says, how would you have a foot pedal with this kind of piano device, or do you need one? Well, I think we just looked at that. Not a piano pedal. Oh, no, wait a second. That's the same one. Yeah, we just covered that. So here we go. Douglas Carmichael now came up for me. The concept of Easter eggs came from the video game industry. With modern source code control systems and engines like Unreal or Unity, isn't it harder to hide something that isn't noticed in a well-run software testing or QA process?
So the thing I find with this that's quite interesting, you actually find that the people who put Easter eggs in that are not necessarily in code. They could be actually in a resource, so in an image. So that's one way they can do it, because they can actually hide it in an image. Another way they can do it is the person who puts Easter egg, they put Easter eggs in intentionally, because they know that their fans of their particular software are looking for them. And it's just a little nod. Usually it's a nod to previous versions. So let's say if it's in a game, it nods to characters that may be in a previous version of that game that may have been killed off in the series, let's say. And they actually just put like a little mural up there or something like that. So we do see these kind of things come up. Go ahead, Bill.
And sometimes it is the team that's building the software that hides something that they know that the people who are serious about their products will investigate. One of the more famous ones, when Final Cut first came out, literally, if you didn't do anything for a while, like if you got distracted and you weren't actually editing, a small yak would show up on your timeline. He would walk out, chew a little bit of grass, and then a thought bubble would appear above his head with a pithy little saying. And sightings of Bruce the Yak were part of the chatter about this is 1984, this then new NLE, and people started looking for him, and they started capturing and trading the sayings that Bruce the Yak came out with. And that kind of showed that you were part of the internal club of being in that software at that time. So they're not entirely flights of fancy. They're a way for the community to know something special that everybody else who just dabbles a little bit might not know as much about. And then you talk about that, and then people get curious, and suddenly they're investigating the software. I think they actually have a legit business purpose if used correctly.
That's true. They can be. So I remember Microsoft used to have this Easter egg that used to be quite annoying. When you tried to write a letter in Word, this thing came up like a paperclip. I don't know what it was. I don't know. It's just weird. This thing in Microsoft Word and it always asks, are you trying to write a resume? No matter what you're trying to do, it says, are you trying to write a resume? Go ahead, Courtney.
Clippy was not an Easter egg. The whole idea behind Easter eggs is they should be difficult to find and uncover. So a lot of people that, the programmers that write them in, encrypt them, and they'll put them in as string data stored somewhere in an obsequious place. So they're a little bit hard to find by just examining the source code. You have to actually look at the code itself, and a lot of times they'll put in a assembly language subcode in there that the disassembler may not even be able to detect, because it's encrypted, that only unencrypts itself once the program is running. So there's lots of ways to hide Easter eggs in there and not have them discovered until after the software is out and you know the secret key of how to get there.
Go ahead, Tlaloc.
A wonderful way to hide things is in plain sight. So how do you make something seem like it's normal and then actually not be? And that goes on the level of what the end user is seeing and looking at, that they look at every day. They'll probably run their eye across it every day and not notice that there's something there until they know to look for it. And I think that kind of also is the case with code, right? So if something looks like it's the regular code that doing the regular thing, and it's easy to look past that when you're trying to find things. So
that's true. Yeah, hiding it in plain sight is sometimes that's something that happens, and some higher up executives have to say, "How no one saw this? How did this get through?" That's true. Go ahead, Greg.
And I think the other thing is that a lot of coders consider themselves artists, not just technicians. And every programmer I know has some way of signing their work. And this is very typical, to leave some little Easter egg here or some little line of code that could make sense in one in one context and not another, or something like that. But it's a way for them to sign their work.
Yeah, that's right. So it's like a digital signature in their software, in their program. That's correct. Now, the next thing we're going to go to is an update from Anaheim. So this is a video package that's been collected. This is actually a product I'm really interested in. So this is from SSL and the Big Six. So let's go to that video now.
Hey everybody, it's George the Tech at NAMM 2022 in Anaheim, California. And we finally made it to SSL. Maybe you've heard of them. I don't know, maybe. I mean, it's freaking SSL. Well, they've got something that is really interesting because it's big and it's small all at the same time. Tell us about it, Ross.
Hey, how you doing, George? Nice to see you. Right, so Big Six, yeah, it's the evolution of the modern day Studio Classic 6, or now as our customers and users are calling 6 Little 6, because we have a Big Six now. So Big Six is a 16-channel analog mixer with full USB sound card integration. I mean, that sounds like, yeah, it's an analog mixer with a sound card, but it's a lot more than that. As you know, we understand production workflow. We've been working with the world's top artists, engineers for decades, and that culmination of experience and knowledge is distilled within Big Six, and I'll explain why. So, we have 4 super analog channels here with mic and line inputs, 48-volt phantom power and high Z for DI and guitars and so on. The super analog inputs use technology directly taken from our 9000 series consoles. You know, the colossal 9000Js, the Ks, the big U-shaped guys.
Those legendary SSL consoles.
The giants of old. It uses exactly the same circuit design and ethos behind that in this console. So what that means is super detailed, super high resolution, wide, punchy sound, super dynamics. What you put in, you get out, and it sounds fantastic. Further to that, on the 4 super analog channels, you get full channel processing. So you've got channel compressors, again, taken from our large format consoles. They have program-dependent attack and release times, so they work with the audio that you're using, and we've cut it down into this super workflow-friendly single threshold. So there's no attack and release editing. It does it all under the hood, which is really cool. So smooth hi-hats, bring out presence in vocals. Yeah, it's got you covered.
It's also more user-friendly. You know, for a home studio owner maybe that doesn't want to spend hours figuring out which should I set my attack and release.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the first 4 channels, as I say, all super analog. We've got 4 stereo channel inputs here that can also go into dual mono mode, so you're not burning faders on mono sources. Really get the most out of the remaining, 8 channels technically. So further to that, the USB integration, and this is for me where it gets really, really cool. So the first 12 channels, they're mapped across the faders, as you would imagine. So you've got from USB 1 to look at your USB input here, and that will then go down the channel. But it's what happens with the remaining 4 channels that really gives you workflow flexibility. So the remaining 4, you could map them so that they're giving you I/O into your DAW for the stereo Q sends. So you could start building up really complex effects chains in the box and then have them routed so that they're hitting the analog mixer. And you can do that twice. Or if you're doing a take or you're tracking, you could route the USB to the headphone inputs, or you could route them to the monitoring section. It really is super flexible and offers the latest in hybrid workflow.
Brilliant, and we know the quality is amazing. So, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, man. It's been a busy day, we know, and we appreciate you finishing out the show for us today.
That's quite all right. It's great to see you, George, as always. Have a great remainder of the show.
Thanks, Ross.
It's great to hear an update there from SSL on the NAMM show floor. So we're actually going to cross live now to the Anaheim in NAMM show floor for 2022. We'll cross live to that team now.
I'm supposed to give you a sing. Let's all do it. Hey, everybody. This is George the Tech at NAMM Show Day 3 here in Anaheim, California. And we've got another demo of portable music technology that it just takes it to another level of creativity and fun, clearly fun. And Free Drum is the product we're checking out today. And here to tell us about it are the co-creators, correct, of the product. The name on the left over here, I'll never forget, George. The one next to me, I totally forgot.
Philip,
thanks. How's it going, guys? And Roy's going to be doing a demo later, so we'll go to Roy in a minute. But it's as a co-creatorship, one of you thought of it first.
Well, actually, it was originally neither of us. I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, sure. So the company originally started in 2016, and the thing with drums, right? Drums are fantastic, but it's an instrument that requires you to have the space. Requires you to live in not an apartment, but a house, so you don't disturb your neighbors. And also they're quite pricey. So it's a common problem that people have. And we thought, well, look, the sales of drum kits are declining, acoustic drum kits. But we think that, there's a space for us to sell as many drum kits as guitars. And currently there are about 5 times more guitars being sold in the world than drums. But every band needs a drummer. So why is that? So what we're doing is actually trying to increase the size of the drumming market by 5 times, because we think we can achieve that with this kind of product.
Yeah, I mean, this now puts drumming into bands that would normally leave the drummer at home, not hire a drummer. There'll be no drum machine, whatever it is. This now makes that far more feasible. And I think fun, because my daughter is 13 and just learning to play drums. And something like this would make that so much more exciting for her.
Absolutely. I mean, what we want to do is make drumming as accessible to as many people as we possibly can. I mean, for us, both through the software as well as the hardware, we're literally creating the products we wish for around when we started learning drumming as teenagers.
So I'll ask just a few techie things, like how many different sensors are we looking at with this whole system?
Yeah, so we have got 2 on the knees, which are the pedal sensors, and then 2 in each, one in each drumstick. And we've actually developed all our intellectual property in-house, so it's all proprietary. We have a patent pending on the technology. And what we're doing is creating a 3D positioning with the drums. So actually, the drumsticks understand where they are in space.
Oh, it's not just a motion sensor.
It's not just a motion sensor. It's actually comparable to technologies that you find in the Oculus Quest, for example. But the thing about that technology is it's very expensive because you need cameras and then you need really fast processors to handle all that information.
And large batteries as well. And large batteries.
So we're using ultrasound, which means the performance is really high on embedded electronics, which are much more affordable, meaning that we can create this at a much better price.
I mean, this kind of a technology was impossible 10 years ago because imagine there's batteries in all those things, right? And to have batteries that can last long enough for performance and fit in those small spaces, especially the drumsticks, it was impossible 10 years ago.
Yes, and thanks also to MIDI over Bluetooth. That's a technology pioneered by Apple, so thanks to them that we're able to utilize that technology to make this possible. Because otherwise everything would need to be connected by wires, and well, that's just less fun.
So I see what's strapped to him and what he's holding. What else is in the system?
We have a software component. So, one thing about the drums or any instrument, you go to a music store, you buy it, and then you take it home, and it's up to you to figure out, okay, how am I going to learn to play this? Do I go to YouTube? Do I get a tutor? So for us, we were like, can we actually control the entire experience? So you purchase the hardware from us. Also, you can use our application, which is available on Mac OS, Windows, iOS, and Android, and we teach you how to play. We have over 300 lessons. It's all software-based. We have full-length songs in there. So you're learning how to play along to introductions, choruses, verses. We have different types of genres of music, jazz, rock, blues, drum and bass, if you really want to like play really quickly. And that, of course, the difficulty level increases as you move through the course. We've taken a lot of inspiration from the gaming industry. The one thing the gaming industry can do really well is keep someone in front of a screen for 6 hours a day. But we want to do that, but get them learning musical instruments. So we have achievements that you unlock in the application as well.
That's such an important part of it. And not just be a silly game that's a simulation of playing drums with, we all know what those games are, but this is really learning to play drums. And the software, as we all know, is a huge part of any product now. And if you don't have that software component built correctly, running well and inspiring and easy to use, it's just a piece of hardware,
Absolutely. I mean, that's really what we've been focusing on. There's about 2 years worth of learning in there. All of our lessons, they're built on real music theory, so it's not just a gimmick. And the best thing is that the software is available not only with our hardware, but any electronic drum kit out there. Because, from our research, on average, drum lessons cost about $65 an hour. It's just not accessible to a lot of people in this country or anywhere else in the world. So we feel that there's a place that's somewhere between $65 an hour and trying to navigate YouTube on your own, and that's really where we exist.
Well, since you mentioned pricing, so is the software free?
Elements of it are. So just to be able to get going, make some drum noises, absolutely, that's for free. You can download it from any of the app stores that are out there. If you want to take our lessons, it's $10 a month, so comparable to some of the other streaming services that are out there.
Awesome. Well, I think this would be I want to say, what's the price?
So the hardware costs $299. That includes everything that you see that Roy's holding here, as well as the app that'll run on, as Philip mentioned, on your computer or on your phone. And then should you want to also do the courses, it's $10 a month, but we do offer a free trial so anyone can give it a go and sort of figure out for themselves whether it's for them or not.
Again, bravo pulling together the education element with the product. I mean, a $300 drum kit does exist, but it's very cheaply made and almost no one can play with them, especially in an urban environment. So, well, this is the time I think we've been waiting for. We would love to hear Roy give us a little demo.
Absolutely.
Yeah, double kick, double pedal. Let's hear it with some backing tracks. Yeah, I heard you have some backing tracks for us to see.
If they can see.
And I'll explain what's on screen. We might be able to fly it in later because this is a package. We're going to edit this. We're seeing this, what looks like an infinite guitar neck.
Note highway. Note highway.
A note highway. And it's scrolling into frame from the back to the front. And we see it's basically telling you, the student, which of the triggers or pads you're supposed to be playing and when. So it's a fun teaching tool that feels like a video game.
Exactly. I mean, and that's really what we've tried to do. Music theory is very important, but for a young person, maybe sitting there doing scales or paradiddles is not really the most inspiring way to learn. So how do we...
Sorry about that, George. Let me have you do that again because I had our drummer too loud in my mix. That was my fault. Go ahead, George.
Look, music theory is really, really important, but for a young person just starting off, maybe doing scales or paradiddles all day long is not the most inspiring way to learn. So, for us, it's about practice. Like that's where it's at, you know. And if we can make it fun and get someone practicing 20 minutes a day, we know that they'll progress. So we're really trying to crack that formula, and we think this is a great first step.
You know what? I saw you guys at NAMM the last time there was a physical NAMM, and I shot a little package myself. I was running around solo. Oh, cool. So seeing you guys again and seeing the next iteration, seeing it maturing, and even seeing it played live with, Dream Theater, Jordan Rudess. That was crazy, right? Yeah. So what a cool experience. It's really been fun to get to meet all you guys here, to see the product. I hope the rest of the remaining day is just as productive for you guys.
Great. Thanks so much for having us, George.
We really appreciate this thing.
Thanks, Roy.
Thank you.
There you have it. NAMM Show 2022 here in Anaheim, California. Free drum. Rock on.
So, George, if you're able to hear me, George. So hopefully with free drum we can actually get an update, because what I wanted to know was whether we could actually get a marching band to use that equipment. So George, are you able to ask the question whether that technology is able to be used with marching bands?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We almost let you guys go without letting us answer some live questions from the people who are actually watching this live right now. Please go ahead with that question.
So this was a question from me on the panel, so you'll have to relay it. But can the technology be used with marching bands and similar?
Do you guys see this technology being possibly used out in a field situation, like literally a marching band field? Has anybody considered that?
Okay, so the great thing about using ultrasonics as opposed to other technologies that are used in VR is that you can definitely use it outside, 100%. With the way we've got to set it up right now, we probably wouldn't want somebody walking around, but playing indoors, outdoors, cloudy, sunny, to some degree even rainy and windy is totally fine.
Got it. Well, we have our field monitor up here with Mukana where we can see questions, and we're standing by to see a question on that. We just refreshed it, so let's see if it pops up like magic. And there it is. It's working. From Douglas Carmichael, could you see free drum being a popular performance instrument if you could interface it to any sound module or plugin?
Well, you can. So we're using MIDI over Bluetooth, and you can use it with any DAW. So our personal favorites, we use it with Reason, GarageBand, Moto drums, with our app, of course. Because we're using MIDI, it's compatible with any software that you like.
So now apps. So when you're using those instruments, are they working as a plug-in in your app, or is your app acting as a plug-in in another thing? How do things talk to each other once it's in the computer?
We use the system settings on whether you're using Windows or Mac. You can connect that as a MIDI instrument, and then it's up to you which software you want to use. We highly recommend our software if you're looking for the sort of learning and customization of your drum kits. But if you want to record and take it to the next level and actually use it in a production, we would recommend jumping into Logic or Ableton, as Roy uses, for example. Yeah.
I'll just add something to this, actually, and that is most people look at this product and they assume that it's a beginner's tool, and beginners love it. But about 50% of our customers are actually experienced musicians, and we even have a small slice of professional musicians that either use it as a very expressive MIDI controller in a music production setting, as well as just a really cool performance tool, because it looks very different to what a traditional drum kit looks like.
The drummer is always at the back of the stage, right?
So we're forward.
So we're trying to get more drummers in the front stage,
Do you guys know the band Bella Fleck and the Flecktones? Oh my gosh. Okay. You need to get this set up in the hands of not Victor Wooten. Victor Wooten's the bass player. His brother is the drummer, and he plays all the drums on a thing that looks like a synthesizer axe thing.
Really?
I would think he would dig the heck out of this thing. He's called Future Man.
Future Man. I think
that's what he's called, Future Man. This seems like a no-brainer to me.
Absolutely.
And there's a very good chance one of the Wootens is here. I've seen Victor at NAMM many times, so who knows? But anyway, anything else from back at the studio? I know you guys are excited to talk about this.
So, George, we actually have a question from one of our panelists. It'll be a question into your ear, so go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, can you talk about the latency for MIDI over Bluetooth? I'm concerned to see what is that like for the actual performer.
So yeah, the concern is latency. What is the inherent latency that's going on in the system?
So with any MIDI of a Bluetooth device, you can have between 1 to 7 milliseconds of latency, but we actually compensate for that in our firmware. So, when we strike the stick, we're actually sending the hit before the full deceleration of the drumstick. So we do our best to compensate for that latency inside our software. So, I mean, Roy, you've been a professional drummer for 30 years. You're an employee at the company, but please, what is your honest opinion about the latency?
Yeah, so my first time I tried it, I was like, okay, if there's latency, it's not playable, because you cannot play when there's latency, especially for a drummer. If you see a drum video and there's latency, it's just gets you off. So with this one, because of the predictive hit detection, it feels so natural, and that for me is like number one thing. So if it is not on time, it's like I cannot play. So
that latency, the key thing here is that the latency has been obviously considered. We know how important, you guys know how important the latency is.
George, we are all musicians, and Roy is a professional on the team. George's been playing instruments since you were six. I started playing the drums when I was 14. We're really creating a musical instrument, so we are really paying attention to these kind of details. We manufacture our drumsticks out of real hickory wood. We don't just use plastics, because we feel like it needs to be a musical instrument first, and that goes both for the hardware as well as the software.
Well, it's amazing. I think there's a lot of excitement about this back in our field, back in our studio. What's going on in the studio is we've got a whole bunch of people all in one, sort of a very, very fancy Zoom room. Yeah, and so they're all listening, watching, interacting, discussing, geeking out, and asking questions. So they're firing back at me with these questions. I'm going to throw. Do you guys? How much time do we? It's almost 10:30. How much more time can you guys hang?
As much as you need.
You guys are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with it. Back to the studio. What else? What else you got for free drum?
So, George, we've now got questions showing up in Mukana. So, if you're able to see the Mukana questions, we'll go ahead.
Yeah, Mukana is live on the iPad. Douglas Carmichael asks, how do you see free drum working with existing music education apps like Melodics?
So, I mean, because it's a MIDI controller, essentially, like you could use it with Melodics. And I think Melodics is a great product. We've sort of taken our own spin on it, to be honest. The one thing that we've noticed about a lot of, music apps in general, and music software packages in general, is that they follow a very particular theme. They tend to be very dark. They use a certain iconography, and particularly Philip and I, we're product people from the consumer world. So we spent many years working as designers and engineers, working on highly technical products for the mass market, such as mobile phones. So for us, if you have a look at our app, as opposed to most of the software out there, it's about being inviting. It's about being consuming. What can we borrow from other industries and bring that to music? Again, with the sole purpose of creating as many musicians out there as we possibly can.
Instruments can be really intimidating, and design plays a huge factor in that. I mean, most software, as George said, is quite dark and feels quite technical.
I think if it's music related, it's like black T-shirts and,
Oh, yeah, we are wearing black T-shirts, actually, a good point. But, Melodics, as George said, is a great product, but we really want to make our software inviting. One of the major differences is that we use full-length songs of fully licensed music. So, it's really we're placing music as the forefront. You're learning how to do introductions, changing bridges versus choruses, and it's all based on the genre of music first, right? So if you like blues, you can focus on the blues course. If you like jazz, focus on the jazz course. Rock, drum and bass, as I said earlier, if you want to play 180 BPM, that's totally fine. The great thing is that we release courses weekly. We launched the app in January, and we have over 300 lessons. And as George said, there's enough content in there, if you're a complete beginner, to go through 2 years of drumming curriculum. And if you're more advanced, try it out. There's some pretty complex stuff in there. One other thing, the software is compatible with all electronic drum kits that exist today. So if you don't have a hardware, then you can actually plug your electronic drum kits, just like Melodics, into either your iPhone, Android, Windows, or Mac computer, and learn with our software. So, it's 2-week free trial. If you have used Melodics, try out Free Drum. You can get it at freedrum.rocks. And try it out and let us know what you think, because we're really trying to make the product as good as it can be.
Well, you guys are really inspiring the viewers, because I keep hearing there's more coming in. So we're going to keep talking until someone says it's okay, enough already, because they're loving it.
So George,
Peter Moore asks, why would free drum be subscription based? surely a one-off purchase would be good.
Okay. I presume that question is about the software.
Right, the software itself.
The software itself. So
I think this leads back to what Philip was saying earlier on, where we're constantly creating new content, and we're trying to challenge what is it the drummers should be consuming. So when you look at drumming, it's very easy to go to hard rock, heavy metal. That's the obvious choice. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be working on a K-pop course. We do singer-songwriter courses. This is not the type of stuff that is generally associated with drumming in the same way that hard rock and metal is. And, to do that, we have to have an ongoing team. We have to be constantly working on our software.
Yeah, and just to sort of add to that as well, the great thing about this type of software and any type of software that's part of sort of a subscription service is when the more you invest in it and yourself, the more you use it, the better the software becomes because you have more data in there. You move through the courses, and in this business, the right approach, the right business model for that is a subscription service. Because if it would just be a sort of a one-off purchase, it'd be very difficult for us to kind of grow on it, as George said, sort of week by week and keep it moving forward. The hardware is not a subscription, so the hardware is a one-off purchase. And as you said, currently you get 3 months for free with the software. So if you pre-order the drum kit today, you can get 3 months for free with the software. If you don't like it, you can move on. But if you like it, then we're really excited to have
And then I think the other thing to sort of pay attention is to compare the subscription purchase model, you need to compare it to drum lessons. You know what I mean? Because, from our research, on average, drum lessons cost about $65 an hour. That's just not available to everyone. It just isn't. And, we're not trying to put teachers out of work. I mean, we love real teachers, but we're trying to use software to create the next best alternative to that, so...
You guys are trying to create more drummers.
Yeah, literally. I mean, it's mind-boggling to us that rhythm is at the core of music and that every modern band has a drummer. So why is there 5 times the amount of guitarists out there? It just doesn't make sense.
Carl, who's our anchor back at the studio, has a question himself. He's going to relay it to me, and I'm going to relay it to you.
So it's actually one of our panelists here, George. So Greg Cooter's going to ask you a question coming up.
Go, Greg.
So Greg will be the next voice you hear.
Hi, George. Greg, how are you, man?
Awesome.
Good. I'm wondering if the sync on this is good enough to be able to use live on stage with other band members.
Yeah, this is another question about latency or sync. He's saying, can this really be used live viably? We have a demo. You guys are going to get to see it. You didn't get to see it live, but you'll see that it's a legitimate live performance tool.
I mean, the other thing is about 2 weeks ago, we performed, we're from Sweden, so we were up on stage with the Cardigans. So Roy performed live with the Cardigans. So it very much so was a legitimate performance tool.
Yeah, well, I'm just inspired by it. I mean, and I hope my daughter, she's 13, she's trying to figure out what is she. Right now, she's an artist, but she's learned drums, she's learned clarinet. I'm like, if I find the right thing that inspires her to want to keep playing music, and if this could be that would be huge, because I have a music background myself.
George, can I ask you a personal question? I mean, what was the kind of process you as a father going through to say, okay, we can actually get a drum kit in our house? I assume you live in a house.
I live in an apartment. My daughter lives in an apartment. We live in Venice and Santa Monica. There's neighbors around. You clearly couldn't do it the right, the acoustic way.
Okay.
So electronic drums has been in the back of my mind, but then again, that takes a lot of space. That's expensive. This is just something that is going to allow that to be more accessible or even possible for her.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, what we love about our product is the fact that we love real drums so much. We've got 2 of them at our office ourselves. But as a drummer, and it's regardless if you're a professional or a beginner, if you have the most expensive kit on the market or the cheapest one on the market, 99% of the time you're not next to your drum kit. So what's your next alternative? Well, it's a practice pad or, the back of a bucket or something along the lines of that. So this really is that fantastic complement to really to get your practice hours in and get your creative spirits going.
Absolutely. Is there more from the studio? We can grab one more or two.
That's right. So we're going to hear next. We're going to hear from Courtney.
All right, Courtney.
How can you emulate? Do the sticks allow you to emulate mallets or brushes? And how do you do a rim shot if you're hitting in midair?
These are great questions, really detailed. This one's about getting different styles of drumming or different types of sticks involved, like a brush or a rim shot. Is that stuff possible now, or do you think it would be possible?
I think so. The rim shot we have had in our previous product. So this is the second generation of that. I mean, the great thing about our technology is that it's down to millimeter accuracy in terms of the spatial positioning. So our hardware team is investigating how is it possible to actually create a brush sound, and what would the user interaction be. So today, currently, right now, at the second, no, it is not possible. But because we have our own R&D team and we're currently working, we have a team of 7 engineers, we're looking into these things and always wanting to make our product better. So the one great thing about this is it's all updatable over the app on your phone. So once you receive the product, we're making it better every day and providing you with updates. So these things all come for free of charge after you purchase.
Excellent. What else do we have in the studio? Is this the Mukana question? Oh, that's the one we just answered. What else do we got back in the studio?
So let's go to the next Mukana question, John.
All right, on the Mukana screen, if you wanted to use FreeDrum for performance and production only, would there be an option to purchase the hardware without the subscription?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Just to be more detailed, you buy the hardware, you get the app for free. It's only the educational lessons that cost as a subscription. But as Philip mentioned, you can run the hardware through our app. You can run it through any DAW on your computer. So, yes.
Some folks are just sensitive about subscription words.
I understand.
Absolutely.
Understood. What else? Douglas says, could you see the FreeDrum technology being beneficial for those with disabilities as both entertainment and rehabilitation? That's a great idea.
The one really inspiring thing about working in a music company is that you have people from different walks of life, people that, different things that happen to them in their lives, and they contact you and you say, wow, this could be really, really great. We had a customer a while back who was in a car accident, had his legs amputated, couldn't play the drums, and, by attaching the sensors to his limbs, he was able to actually play the drums again. We had another customer in the Netherlands who had to go through brain surgery, and they wanted to monitor the signals in his brain while he was playing the drums, while they were operating on him. So, we think therapy is a really interesting use case for this instrument. As we're a small team, we're laser focused on developing our technology first for drummers, but as we said, we want to increase the drumming market by 5 times, and we think therapy could be a really, really interesting pathway to just try and introduce more people into the instrument.
Put it out there, and you have no idea what use cases may come. And when somebody starts throwing out therapy, rehabilitation, I'm sure your brain's spinning.
One of our customers, I think his Instagram tag is the acoustic drummer. I mean, he's literally talked about his journey with FreeDrum, addressing his, like the challenges he faces as someone with autism. So it's pretty well documented. So we're just really lucky that we can help people like that.
Incredible. What else we got, guys? Oh, another one on the screen is the FreeDrum waterproof, so I can use it in the shower. This is awesome.
So there are 2 places where you can't use FreeDrum. One of them is in the shower, unfortunately. The other one is in space. So we haven't tested. I'm South African, so I'm trying to get a hold of Elon Musk so we can send one up into space. But he doesn't return my calls. I don't know why.
Elon, I know you're a fan of office hours. Come on.
Well, you know what? Actually, I haven't tried it, so it might be possible to use it in the shower. Let's say that.
Maybe for at least a moment or two. Until it's not IPX7, guys. Sorry. Can't be everything to all people all the time. But that's a funny idea. It just shows the joy people are getting in seeing this product. Brian Anderson says, can the user define locations? So if I wanted a gong behind me, I could set that up?
Okay, so you can, as it is using MIDI, you can set any sound that you like. In short, in terms of something behind you, unfortunately not. So the way our technology works is that the drumsticks need to communicate with the pedal sensors. So that range happens, traditional size of a drum kit, which is about kind of a 1 meter radius all the way around you. So something behind you might be technically possible.
In a future version?
We try to fit everything in front of you, right?
Anything's possible. It's technology, guys. With time, money, the more you guys buy these, the more they're inspired and they have the support to develop more sensors and more possibilities, obviously, right? That's how it works. Andrew Lipnick says, what is the reliable Bluetooth range of the product? Can it be extended? Interesting.
It's comparable to Bluetooth headsets. So we've actually, in our office, is about 300 square meters. We use it from one side of the office to the other. So it is, in terms of using it on a live performance, there is definitely enough range for you to be able to use it quite a far distance away from it.
On most stages, there's plenty of line of sight. You don't have walls and obstacles between.
Yeah, exactly. So the Bluetooth range is, unfortunately don't have a figure in terms of footage or meterage, but
the specs are so dubious because they're always in a controlled, and it's always up to 30 meters or whatever. It's at the end of the day, what is it going to do in the real world in your situation? And if you have that line of sight, obviously you're going to be you're in better shape. Exactly. We could do another one, and then we can wrap it up here from the show floor. Is there any tactile feedback from the drumsticks? Interesting idea.
Yes, so each of the drumsticks has an LRA motor, which is a fancy term for something like the same vibration that you feel on your phone. And what we do is we actually take the audio sample from the drums, we send it through that motor, and the vibration that you feel changes depending on if you're hitting the hi-hat, so that'll be a quite tight sound, or if you're hitting the floor tom, which will give you a bit more of a rumble. It's comparable to the Nintendo Switch, the Joy-Con controllers. They call it a rumble or something like that, and it provides you with a kind of a more immersive experience.
Now, how much did you pay? I mean, that is amazing. I'm thinking of what the value of the price of the product is, and then when you say, "Oh, and it also does that," it's like, and there's one more thing. No, that is awesome. I'm so glad Denny Law actually asked that question because that's super, super relevant. Well, you guys, I'm just blown away. I'm so glad you could spend so much time with us. I mean, we've all been here for about an hour and a half. So you guys are really been awesome and patient to hang out with us, do this demo. I know you need to get back to your booth and see everybody else who's now wandering the show floor. So thank you again. Thanks for joining us here on Office Hours. If you guys want to find us, we're at officehours.global, so you can come back and watch it later. And it's been a real pleasure. Let's send it back to you guys in the studio so we can start running the halls again.
Great to hear from our live team there, live on the NAMM show floor down there at Anaheim. So yeah, these kind of the free drums is quite amazing. So seeing how that technology is able to give you haptic feedback into the sticks, hearing that is actually a very cool thing, because I was thinking I'd want to see if it has haptic feedback, because you'd get the sound feedback if you got like a monitor speaker, but having a haptic feedback coming back to you via the sticks is really important. Because as I use electronic drums myself, I have actually the smallest set that I could possibly find from Roland, but they're physical drums, unlike the air drums like that. But it's interesting to see that kind of technology and how far it can go with ultrasonic technology like that. So if any of our panelists have any comments they want to talk about that, just make sure you put your hand up in Mukana, and we'll get to that as well. So go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was wondering if they could emulate, because one of the hardest drum kits to haul around is a set of timpani, and I wondered if they could emulate a timpani, and how would you emulate the dampening with your hand,
the tuning as well,
and the tuning pedal as well on the timpani. And I wondered if the sensor that's on your leg is sensitive enough to determine the height of your leg to change the tuning, or maybe they could make it touch sensitive, so that if you touch the top of that pedal pad, it would mute the drum, or hand mute a drum that's ringing.
Hand mute the drum. That's right. Yeah. Excellent. That's something actually you can do with electronic drums with pads. When you put your hand there, they actually can recognize your hand, like it's a capacitive feedback they have in the rim, so they know when, essentially, it's also when you choke a cymbal. So it'd be interesting to know if you can actually put your hand up and choke a cymbal as well. That's one thing we didn't ask, whether you can choke a cymbal and play it that way. Go ahead, Greg.
I think, first of all, I have to have this. Second of all, I can see this creating havoc everywhere. The remotes is never going to be the same again, and it's going to be it's going to be all drum songs from here on out, and everybody's going to want to play drums. So the second thing, could you imagine the havoc you could cause at a sound check? Just doing these like off stage, having these off stage and having the drummer sound check, and it's, oh, never mind. I shouldn't even say stuff like that, but I think this is fantastic. I think it's great.
Yeah, it is quite amazing, and especially if you have a sound check, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, there's so many technological possibilities with this. They're in the infancy stages of it. You can imagine that just changing your hand position, if they put something like multi-touch on there, and that being able to change or do, a slide finger doing that, damping your thinking. There's just all sorts of possibilities. This is the beginning of that. The other thing I noticed here, and this blew me away in a very positive way, I just checked over into a different tab here, and the number of people who engaged to ask questions during that. We only saw 3 or 4 or 5. We had time to get those on the air, but there were another half a dozen questions that had flooded in. So in terms of proof of concept of what we're trying to build here, it's unbelievable the amount of instant engagement. The audience wants to be able to ask questions of people in this remote circumstance, and this is just making me feel really hyped about what we're trying to do here and all the effort that's been put in by so many people.
Yes, and we'd like to thank all the team that are in the back end as well, so the people you don't see on camera. So there's a lot of work happening back there to make sure all this is happening. So we'd like to thank them as well. Go on to Talak.
Whoops. Find that mute button. There it is. Fumble, 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 fumble. No, I was just going to say the timpani idea. I think Stagehands Everywhere just thanked you. That was awesome.
You don't have to drag around kettle drums. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. So not having to drag around the large kettle drums, that's true. Getting them on and moving them and not damaging, and if they're copper base as well, not damaging them, not changing, because once you change the shape of a kettle drum, they go out of tune. Go ahead, Danny.
Well, definitely a great innovation to get people inspired to learn up drums, to learn rhythms and all that. I guess, you're going to have another breed of drummers because they'll be playing air drums without learning the traditional bounce of the heads and the kit as they hit it. So I'm wondering, how that would impact. I guess how you would actually play a drum kit, whether it be an acoustic or electronic set. When you get to it.
That's true. Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's go to the next question, Bill.
Oh, the next one.
You go ahead, Bill. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I can imagine if this takes off and they manage to have the resources to do it, you could put a little double touchpad thing that somebody could hit, and you hit the front, it's like the rim, and you hit the back, it's like the drum. So there's certainly a lot of room at the top end of this to create new and unusual triggers and things like that could ape some of these physical things that a drummer right now is saying, well, it probably doesn't do that now. Just never give the innovative people short shrift about what they can come up with if there's money to be had for coming up with it.
That's exactly right. Go ahead, Greg.
No, just to follow up on Danny's comment. I don't play drums, so I don't really have an answer for this. But maybe it's possible that if you use this to practice, that at least you would get the series of body movements together. You wouldn't get that the bounce impact. That would be something you have to integrate later once you actually got some drums, but possibly you could get the motor functions worked out in advance. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah, that's understandable. Next question, Bill.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. He says, could you see the free drum sensing technology being adaptable to related use cases like AR environments for children?
Yeah, I could definitely see this ultrasonic sensors, pumping out via Bluetooth. For AR, definitely. So many applications of that as well. I can definitely see that. Next question, Bill.
Douglas Carmichael is moving into a different area here. He says, Paul McCartney is touring with a pair of Midas Heritage 4000 consoles on monitors, even with the Avid 6 S6L consoles at front of house. Wouldn't soundcheck be a lot harder when you have to rebuild mixers at every show, not to mention parts availability and field support?
So the one thing I found out when you do these kind of larger concerts that Paul McCartney would be involved in, there is probably 2 people per console. So there'd probably be an A1 and an A2 for the front of house console, and there'd be a monitor 1 and a monitor 2 for the back of house, and there'd be another A1 and A2 for the recording side of things, so recording and or streaming. So you'd probably have 6 people who are full-time just touching these consoles and not doing anything else. So essentially with these kind of consoles, they're brought in because the A1 and the production team that have run these kind of concerts, this is what they ask for, and this is what can deliver them the experience that they're hoping to give in these live events. So that's why they're kind of used. Next question, Bill.
Douglas Carmichael's back in again with, could you see major acts ever using free drum as a replacement for conventional kits, either on stage or as a warm-up tool?
Yep, Cirque du Soleil. So I can see this technology being used in Cirque du Soleil because they have live bands, but if you have actually a person out there who's in costume using this technology and actually playing the drums to their own beat, and not playing to playback, which means they can interact with the crowd. And I can also see buskers. So buskers in what you consider out in the field. So buskers would get a lot of attention if they have a little street amp and doing free drums like this. They don't have to worry about their kit being knocked over or rain hitting their kit. So I can see buskers and street performers using this as well. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, you're saying playing the drums. They could also be playing the lights. They could also be playing the mixing console. It's just a series of triggers. So I can imagine in that Cirque du Soleil performance, 3 people playing drums and 3 people playing the lights, and something like, what was it, Blast, the old video I watched, they took marching band to kind of a different level, and you got to see some of the potentials for something that took one form and moved it into another. I think that's what the world's all about now.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And since this is a non-acoustical technology, monitoring becomes crucial in this if you're playing with a group and for the audience as well. So everything has to be in sync. The group has to be able to monitor what that drummer who's leading the beat is doing. And so you'd have to make sure that everyone's in-ear monitors have a good mix of the drums, or that they could control it. And you would eliminate a lot of the problem of having to isolate the drums from the other microphones on stage.
That's exactly true. It would eliminate a lot of that stuff. So we're going to go to another video package now from our team in the field. This is another package they've done with SSL. Let's go to that package now.
Hey everybody, it's George the Tech at NAMM 2022 in Anaheim, California, and we finally made it to SSL. Maybe you've heard of them. I don't know, maybe. I mean, it's freaking SSL. Well, they've got something that is really interesting because it's big and it's small all at the same time. Tell us about it, Ross.
Hey, how you doing, George? Nice to see you. Right, so Big 6, yeah, it's the evolution of the modern day Studio Classic 6, or now as our customers and users are calling 6 Little 6, because we have a Big 6 now. So Big 6 is a 16-channel analog mixer with full USB sound card integration. I mean, that sounds like, yeah, it's an analog mixer with a sound card, but it's a lot more than that. As you know, we understand production workflow. We've been working with the world's top artists, engineers for decades, and that culmination of experience and knowledge is distilled within Big 6, and I'll explain why. So we have 4 super analog channels here with mic and line inputs, 48-volt phantom power and high Z for DI and guitars and so on. The super analog inputs use technology directly taken from our 9000 series consoles. The colossal 9000Js, the Ks, the big U-shaped guys.
Those legendary SSL consoles.
The giants of old. It uses exactly the same circuit design and ethos behind that in this console. So what that means is super detailed, super high resolution, wide, punchy sound, super dynamics. What you put in, you get out, and it sounds fantastic. Further to that, on the 4 super analog channels, you get full channel processing. So you've got channel compressors, again, taken from our large format consoles. They have program-dependent attack and release times, so they work with the audio that you're using, and we've cut it down into this super workflow-friendly single threshold. So there's no attack and release editing. It does it all under the hood, which is really cool. So smooth hi-hats, bring out presence in vocals. Yeah, it's got you
covered. It's also more user friendly, you know, for a home studio owner maybe that doesn't want to spend hours figuring out what should I set my attack and release.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the first 4 channels, as I say, all super analog. We've got 4 stereo channel inputs here that can also go into dual mono mode, so you're not burning faders on mono sources. Really get the most out of the remaining, 8 channels technically. So further to that, the USB integration, and this is for me where it gets really, really cool. So the first 12 channels, they're mapped across the faders, as you would imagine. So you've got from USB 1 to look at your USB input here, and that will then go down the channel. But it's what happens with the remaining 4 channels that really gives you workflow flexibility. So the remaining 4, you could map them so that they're giving you I/O into your DAW for the stereo Q sends. So you could start building up really complex effects chains in the box and then have them routed so that they're hitting the analog mixer. And you can do that twice. Or if you're doing a take or you're tracking, you could route the USB to the headphone inputs, or you could route them to the monitoring section. It really is super, super flexible and offers the latest in hybrid workflow.
Brilliant, and we know the quality is amazing. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, man. It's been a busy day, we know, and we appreciate you finishing out the show for us today.
That's quite all right. It's great to see you, George, as always. Have a great remainder of the show.
Thanks, Ross.
So it's great to hear that from SSL. So the Big 6 is actually one of the consoles I really like as far as a analog summing mixer. So the way I actually like to work is in a way that I use a DAW just like a tape machine. So I simply just use preamps and just have those preamps go, let's say we're doing 16 tracks to a DAW. I don't do any EQ or anything. I just record directly from the microphones into the DAW, doing 16 tracks. And then those tracks, when I want to mix them, I don't mix them inside the computer. That's my choice. So what I want those 16 tracks to come out and actually go to an analog console, and I'll mix them in the analog world. And so this particular device, the Big 6, allows you to do that. You can actually map all 16 channels, so channel 1 to channel 16 coming out of your computer through that, and actually do all the analog mixing, and then have a 2-channel going back into your DAW simultaneously to record again. So you're going to be recording your master, or you can record out to an analog master if you want to record to tape or something. So these are something that I really think this kind of is beneficial for people who want to do analog summing. And it's the price of it is actually, so if you take a look at a high quality analog summing, they usually start at $5,000 and go up to, $10,000 to $20,000. This one coming in under $5,000, and it's also a mixer, can also be used in a live setting as well. It's pretty amazing. Go ahead, Courtney.
They didn't say if it could be used as an interface. They would have to use then a voltage through the analog faders to determine a value if you're going to convert it to MIDI or to interface signals that control a DAW. But I was wondering did they say how many aux sends there are, aux channels there are, and does it support? It looks like it only had room for like 1 knob for aux sends.
So I believe it's 2 mono or 1 stereo. So they call them Qs. So it's a British company, they call them a Q. And so the Q is, I believe there's a stereo Q, and there's another Q that you can actually do as well as far as getting in from the external. So you can actually bring in external from the back as well and do a Q in from the back. So, but it is quite a very interesting console in the fact that it's only got the 4 XLRs that they see on the top, but the 4 XLRs on the top, which brings in your mic, what you're not seeing around the back is what you'd normally see around the back of an SSL console, which is just a bunch of outs. So, and it's all just 1/4-inch balanced outs and ins as well. So you can actually link up 2 of these together, or link this up to a larger console. That's another thing as well. So you can actually bring 2 of these together and you can actually do 32 channels. So now then you're getting close to an SSL Origin, which is a 32-channel console, which is $60,000.
And are there inserts on the back on
yes. Yeah. So that's right. So on the back, there's actually on the 1/4-inch TRS balanced inputs. This is a big game changer for them because they're bringing in under $5,000. Because once you put 2 of these together, you can actually do analog summing mixing for 32 channels, where you just keep on adding 16 channels per box. And so this is something that I'm doing it myself right now in a very similar system, exactly the same with 16 channels coming in from, but I have to use a digital interface to connect to my console because my console is fully analog. Well, technically 2 channels back out to the computer really. But yeah, so what I'm finding is that with this particular system here, this does, because it has a 16 in, well, technically 18 in and 16 back out, because you're doing from the computer, and then you can do an extra 2 because you can link 2 consoles together. So you can actually have 32 channels coming back in, and then one entire console gets fed into the other one, and it just goes straight into the mix. You don't have any volume on it. It's just a sub mix. It goes straight to the main. But this was a pretty big game changer when it was announced, because now you're actually getting. I think this is close to a $10,000 to $20,000 console quality that you're getting for under $5,000, and this is where it's a bit of a game changer. If you're in that world of doing mixing in an analog console, which SSL, this is their second one they've done like this, because they've got the Origin, which I said that's $60,000. That's returned back to, that's why they call it the Origin. It's returning back to the Origin what SSL started in the 70s. But for people who didn't want to spend $60,000 on a 32 channel mixer, then they can do this in a 16 channel mixer. Now, all the channels that you're mixing are not equal. As you see, you've got some will have the full compression, some will have full EQ, some are stereo channels, and some don't have anything but a volume knob. So you choose a volume level. And the 2 that come in as a submix don't have any control at all. They simply just get mixed straight into the main. So whatever you're coming out of your other console gets mixed into the main with this one. But I feel that this is a pretty interesting console, yeah.
I like the fact that they have like a 6 LED input level meter on each channel strip, which is really handy to have, where you can actually detect the signal level coming in.
That's exactly right. So this is something we see on the Origin. So the Origin is technically the next in price. It'll be going from like $3,500, $4,000 for this one up to $60,000. But the Origin, I guess, it has its meter bridge, and its meter bridge I think is like 12 LEDs up the top there. But they've brought a lot of the features from the Origin into this, and of course it's got the channel compressor and the main bus compressor as well, which is quite famous for SSL, used on Phil Collins records back in the early 80s, of course, for their gated reverb and the sound of the 80s, as we call it, from the drums. But yeah, but the Big 6 it's a game changer in a way that SSL have done. I know that also at NAMM, Neve is now in the game. So SSL, a couple of NAMMs ago, they announced their 2-channel interface, just a regular 2-channel computer USB interface. And then this has come out since then, and now Neve is actually playing the game. So Neve are putting in their preamps into a 2-channel audio interface. So we're now starting to see some of these console makers starting to take their 500 series. So what we're seeing in the 500 series, as far as their analog, because 500 series are pretty much all analog, starting to see their 500 series preamps make their way into 2-channel USB or Thunderbolt interfaces, which is pretty cool. How about we go to the next question, Bill?
Absolutely. The next one that comes up is coming from Douglas Carmichael. He says, one of my most memorable live experiences was seeing the crowd miraculously start dancing when the engineer engaged an SSL bus compressor, Allen Smart C2 in specifics. Would using a 6 or a Big 6 on my tracks give a similar energizing effect?
So you can, but you don't have to do it via this, because SSL actually make a digital version of the bus compressor. So you can just add that as a plugin, and it does the exact same dynamics. So I have the same dynamics. It's more to do with if you want to do it in the analog world. You can SSL Big 6 is one of the ways to get that. You can also use the 500 series to also get the same effect, because they have the bus compressor in 500 series, and they've just actually announced the Bus Plus, which is a rack mount, and it is the classic console bus compressor. But it also has a lot more. That's why it's called the Bus Plus, because it actually has a lot more going on. But that's something, a new feature that they've actually announced as well. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, in terms of the fundamental question is, does the music fullness, sound, and impact affect crowds? Unbelievably and absolutely. I've told this story before, but I had a pro bono piece that I was just fiddling around with that had to do with the release of rehabilitated raptors. It was going to be played in a big public venue for the people who volunteered their time to release these birds and kind of rehabilitate them. And in playing a piece of music or an auditioning piece of music, I found one that had a really deep bass hit with it. And so I put that at the moment of the bird release, right? So we get out to the location and we're playing the video back, and I thought, oh, that's really not there. What's wrong? And I went to talk to the people in the PA system, and they said, oh, yeah, we do normally use these just for speech. We've rolled off the bottom end. And I said, can you please put it back? I spent some time on this, and I need that low end there. And I wasn't able to go to the actual show, but I got the report back later that at the moment of that bird release, when that bass note hit, the crowd leaped to their feet and cheered. So it hardened in my mind the idea that sound cues married with video and married with emotional moments, take those moments and make them from a thing into a huge thing. And I never dismissed the idea of how important that careful crafting of a soundtrack is for every piece of visual content that you ever see. And every action movie will tell you they do that constantly.
That's true. It's exactly right. Just a reminder to our Mukana producers, just remember to ask questions. You can ask questions of the panelists here. You can also ask questions of the field when we go back to the field later on. Just pop your questions into Mukana and we'll be able to go through the panel and get those questions answered for you. Go to John.
So, Carl, what's the use case of something like the Big Six? I mean, at $3,000, that's pretty expensive. Is it a live use case? Is it studio use case? Where does that piece of equipment use?
So the Flow 8 is what I choose, and that's around $250 US. My next step would be the Big Six. It's an analog console, so it's all analog. And what it's got to do with, there are certain artists out there who don't mind recording digitally, but they don't want any tracks to be mixed digitally. So they'll add effects to a digital. So they may use plugins and everything, but they don't want to mix their guitars with their drums in the box, so to say. They want to do that in analog. Now, they may actually make stems. So they may do a mix of all the drums together to make maybe a stereo stem of the drums in the computer, but they don't want the actual drums and the guitars and the vocals to be mixed in the computer. They want to do that in an analog sphere. So the Big Six is actually amazing for this because it actually can do 16 channels, as I said, but you can do, it has stereo pairs as far as on the channel 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 to 16. But being able to do that in what's called a summing mixer it's a pretty big deal, and $3,000 is actually very cheap. So if we actually go to any, like, let's say Sweetwater, and take a look at summing mixers from known brands, they don't start at $3,000, they go up to $5,000. So they'll start at $5,000 and go up. So this is where, but as you said, you can use this live. So you can actually use this live. You've got your 4 inputs coming in as far as mic preamps, and then you've got line inputs coming in from like instruments or from a sub mixer from a drum kit. So your drummer may have their own mixer at their end, or they make their own mix at the drum, and then they send a stereo signal out to the main board. So you can actually use this in a scenario, but you can actually use it as live and recording because all the channels can go and be tracked at the same time at 2496. That's another thing. This is the 2496. So 2496 recording going into the computer is quite rare for these kind of machines. So give you an idea, so none of the Behringer consoles like this, they all do 2448, and they generally do it in stereo. And same as the Tascam. So the Tascam, Model 12, Model 16, and Model 24, they're also 2448. The X32, 2448. So they're designed for live reinforcement and maybe live recording. If you actually want to do studio recording, you want to probably hit 2496 to keep your harmonics. And so by doing 2496 into one of these consoles, which you will find in the Midas, so you'll have to step up to the Midas Pro series, so which start at like $20,000 to get 2496 into these kind of consoles. So this is where it's a big game changer. One, you get the resolution in the going into the computer, you get the resolution coming back out as well. So you want to keep the highest resolution you can coming back out to the analog sphere, so your digital analog converters. So it's just that if you know that your workflow is going to be analog summing, you can either just use a rack mount analog summing that's controlled completely digitally, but it's doing all the summing analog, and they start at $5,000. But this one has such a good use case scenario because it can just be used as a live mixer. It can be used as a podcasting mixer. 4 microphones in, not a problem.
So how many output channels does it have over USB, Carl? Is it 16 or is it 4 or is it?
So it's technically 18 with the main mix. So main mix would be 17, 18. But yeah, so you're right, 16 in, and then your main mix will go out. So technically it's 18 audio interface, and then it's 16 back in. So it's 16 USB back in, 18 out, because you've got the main mix going out. But there's 2 extra analog ins as well, which are sum to main. So that's how you can actually hook 2 of these consoles up and get 32 channels. So you can just keep on adding these consoles together, and you can just sum to main. So essentially you can daisy chain these consoles, or you can daisy chain a 6 to a Big Six. So they do have what people now call the Little Six, which is 100% analog. So that one's just a 100% analog console, no digital interface, and you can actually hook that into the Big Six and add yourself an extra 6 channels as well. So that's another cool feature to see. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. This seems interesting also to me, just because of the fact that if anybody has ever recorded anything into an SSL or into a Neve or in any studio, I mean, it's indescribable. You know, when we talk about the difference between analog and digital, and you play the two side by side, something going through an analog console and then something going straight to Pro Tools through a digital console, it's night and day. There's, it's almost like there's no discussion. And I know plenty of people that were recording on Pro Tools rigs, but they'd have an old Otari machine or, some 2-track, analog machine, and they just run them through the electronics. They just run it in and out, at Unity, not doing anything to it. And it was like, oh my God, there's all these harmonics there. There's all this beautiful analog noise. And, so I think it's a feel thing, and so that's where I see the value of this for home studios. 4 straight mic inputs is not a lot, so you're not going to be tracking there really, but to be able to get a nice fat bass, for instance, or some nice fat keyboard or guitar sound or something like that, fat synth sound, I think it'd be well worth it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You got your 4 mic inputs, so I think a project studio is probably where this is better suited to, where you won't be able to get all the musicians at the same time. So if you're doing a project and you need to bring in a bass, essentially a session musician, you'll bring your bass player and you'll bring your drummer. So you're right. So, and that's we're seeing that more and more now, where these kind of recording 24 tracks at once is starting to disappear from your project studio kind of hookup. So you're starting to see these high-end SSL and, as I said, Neves coming out with one, and they're just 2-channel or 4-channel. It's the same thing with Apogee. Apogee have a nice 4-channel one, and then you have to go up to their Symphony to get like 32 channels. So they kind of have this massive gap between like a 4-channel, maybe 8-channel, and then going way up to the 32-channel for their Symphony, which is what they use in Abbey Road to record multiple tracks. So that's something we see as well. But you're right as far as the 4, but there's also SSL also have their 500 series. So they may be expecting you to come in via a preamp, via a lunchbox that may have 4 extra preamps in there, and then you can come out of that via TRS line level and use up the other channels in there. That's correct. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael again. When I've tried making deep bass sounds on the Novation Peak, they always sound thin in comparison to the Moog Prophet 6 OB6 bass sounds I've heard. Could that be a characteristic of the Peak architecture?
So that's got to do with, essentially there's a lot of things going on there, but the Peak or the Summit from Novation, which are one's a 8 voice, one's a 16 voice, they have a different filter structure. So the filter structure in those is a little bit different to the way the filter structure is in a Moog. So a Moog has essentially it's a 4-pole low pass filter. So essentially that's the Moog sound, and that's what Robert Moog patented back in the 60s, was that particular filter. I'm sure that patent's run out now because everyone's using it, including Behringer. But that's one of the reasons why you will see like Mini Moogs uses bass lines for a lot of songs. But you can actually get those sounds out of the Peak but you just have to, there's a lot of tweaking you'll have to do. You won't find maybe presets. So that's the thing. You won't find presets that match like a Mini Moog straight away. But if you change you can change your filter to 24 dB filter, which is a 4-pole filter. And you can actually get your harmonics, because it is using a FPGA for the oscillator, but it's instantly going out of the FPGA in analog. So the whole signal path is analog once it comes out of the oscillator. Essentially, it's just a perfect oscillator because it's computationally perfect waveforms. They go straight out and they actually go through a preamp. So that's another thing with the Peak you can actually use to get the fatter bass sounds, is you can actually, there's an amplifier before the filter, which means you can ride the gain into the filter a bit louder. So what you want to do there is you want to make sure you actually cut out a lot of the high frequencies when you do that. So you're just putting the lower frequencies in if you're doing a bass line, and then essentially make sure you have a 24 dB filter as far as you set up, because you can change it to 12 dB. And then you want to make sure that your output stage, because you have another amp on the output stage after the filter, make sure that one isn't distorted. So you want to make sure that one is not distorted. The way to do that first is have the first one that goes before the filter, the output stage. Make sure that one is actually at unity gain, essentially, so not distorting. Have it level, and then you actually overgain, your overdrive. That's what essentially it is. It's an overdrive. You overdrive the filter. When you overdrive the filter with a little bit of resonance into a 24 dB low pass filter, you'll actually get a much fatter bass sound, regardless if it's a ladder filter that's like in the Moogs. So the other thing that you kind of find with the Novation Peak as well is that you can actually go through the presets and just tweak the presets. So if you find a preset that's pretty close to what you're looking for, you can actually go into that and essentially just play with the filter first and see if you can get that sound to where you like. That's another thing you can do. And you can go menu diving as well to tweak out the actual dynamics of the filter and what type of filter it's going to be using. So that's one of the things you can find with the Novation. I own the Summit, so I'm quite used to the synthesizer. So the Summit's a little bit different because I can actually separate my filters. So it's a 24 dB filter, but I can actually have it running as two 12 dB filters, and then I can separate where they are, which is a bit of a feature that's not found in the Peak. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Douglas, just plop down $700 and get you a Poly D, because it does a pretty good job of emulating that Mini Moog bass line, and the filter setup really sounds very close to the Moog filters.
Yeah, so I would 100% agree with Courtney. I got to say, like, the Summer is about, $3,000 US. The Poly D is around $700 US. I got to say, I have much more of a smile on my face when I play the Poly D. It's instantly fun to play, and it's really easy to get a good sound out of it. So even if your understanding of synthesis is a bit basic, if you just set all the knobs to initial settings, and they'll tell you in the menu how to do that, and then you just bring up the filter or bring down the filter, you just get an amazing sound out of the Poly D very fast. It's a lot of fun to play as well. Really fun. So before we go back to the field again, are there any other topics that any panelists here would like to bring up before we hit the field, or anything you'd like to see or anything you've seen today?
Well, I'm still interested in what the show floor experience. I mean, we got a good little touch on that yesterday, and just how do people feel NAMM has gone for this year? Is the sense of things that it's coming back? Is the sense of things that people are now? Is this the second year or the first year they've been back? I can't remember. I just found out that for Cinegear, which we're going to do next week, they had a small one last year. I didn't even know what happened. So what's the feeling on the show floor for the people who've been out there? I've been interested in that and haven't seen much about it.
That'd be good, actually, when we catch up with the team and we actually maybe do a second hour on this later on. We'll actually be able to hear what their feeling was, especially with Greg, who said he's been there in the past before times. It's actually interesting, but as far as what we can see from here on the panel, we are seeing that it's a little bit easier to actually get in contact with people at these booths. So that it maybe looks like that the actual people attending are not swarming the booths like they sometimes do. So that's something that you'd normally see at these kind of shows, that it's actually very hard sometimes to actually get into a booth and actually trial a new instrument, or speak to someone high up that can actually answer some questions. But it's looking like our team, maybe it's just the weight of our team and being office hours, we can just use our elbows and get in and get the right people. That's one thing as well. And also, but it's looking like that it's a little bit easy access, which is kind of good for our experience, but it seems like maybe the attendees may be a little bit less than normal. And of course, we know that some of the bigger manufacturers aren't there at the moment, like Roland, which normally they would be there because Roland, the company actually started at NAB back in the 60s. So it was actually the founder of Roland was just himself with just one product at NAB in a hotel suite. You know how that happens. You can't afford a booth, so you just get a hotel suite because it's cheaper. He showed off his rhythm maker, and he got some purchases there in North America. Let's go to the next question, Bill.
Okay, the next one is about to come up on my screen, I'm sure. Okay, I can see it down here. It's from Douglas Carmichael. He says, Moog Music employees are currently engaging in a unionization campaign with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW. If they succeed, how might this impact the broader industry?
So I saw a little bit of this go past in the news as well. The thing that I noticed with this was Moog, the company, is not Moog as it used to be. So essentially the Moog that we know now is actually a company created by some people who got access to the trade name Moog. They're fans of Moog, of course, and then they did some products in the early times before they started to make their own products, like the Moog One, for instance. But they did some recreations of the Model D. That was one of the first products they did. But you got to remember that they're a company of actually like-minded people who came together to make an American synthesizer in America. And that comes with them competing with manufacturers elsewhere in the world. And so there's pressures on Moog, the company, to actually price their components that they are sourcing, which they're actually their components, their cost of their components and the cost of their labor may be a little bit too high compared to what the rest of the market around the world is, and we're actually starting to see that now. So that could be something that's happening in the workplace because it's an American-made sense, made 100% in America. Go ahead, Courtney.
And Moog has never been a price competitor. You know, they've operated in their own strata, and you know, they can charge really whatever they want to. And at least now that they're unionized, their employees can afford to send their kids to musical school.
That's true too. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, this has been a tension point for as long as America's been America. I mean, you know, and this is not going to go. I will say that the pandemic and all that disruption and the tearing down of things, and we are hearing over and over again about companies not being able to get their employees to come back to the office and get back to work as easily as they might have thought. I'm sure they thought, you know, that in the original days of the pandemic, it's going to be a few weeks or a few months, and then we'll be back to normal and everything will run. Well, we found that that's not going to be true. There's a lot of things that are disrupted, and they'll be disrupted for a long time, and new structures will have to grow up to address this dissatisfaction and possibilities and globalization and consolidation of all of these things. We know for a lot of things, and we've been hearing that, you know, oh, that brand is now not a brand, it's just part of another large company. Well, that was a history going on, the bigger fish eating the smaller fish for a long time. And that means that instead of having 5 or 6 competitors, you've got one dominant organization. And so when you get consolidation of power in that case, the tradition over the course of history is that you get consolidation of power on the other side. And in a lot of cases, unions came up because there were awful practices that big industries had put together that really did abuse people, and they were really critically important to address those. Then, you know, unions got big for a while and had kind of the same weight, and, you know, we have those eras where there was a lot of rumblings about gangsters being involved, and, you know, you've got Jimmy Hoffa and the rest of those things that were part of history from the union side that made them almost, you're trying to figure out who were the good guys here. I do think in the long run, the fact that you need to get success down to the people who work in the field to create that success is always going to be something that people are going to collectively get together and strive to improve over and over again. Because when things get out of balance, it's bad for everybody. And on top of all of that, we have all these huge things like robotics coming in, making it less critical that you have a lot of individual workers' hands working on things. And that comes in to the circumstances too, and globalization. You know, we're talking in this industry directly about how many people we have working around the world. We're not all doing this show from a shop somewhere in a state under one set of rules. We're doing it globally. So as these kind of shows move out to being major players, how do you even handle accounting and things like that? How do you do the globalization of you know, withholding and taxes and the rest of there's just so many possible ways that this is disruptive, and it has to be settled down. And my hope, just as an individual who's been a little bit near management and a little bit near the working part of the world, at various times in my life, I hope that people of good faith rise up and negotiate in good faith, and that this tendency of, I got the power right now, so the heck with all of you, I'm just going to make every single shekel that I can. I hope we see less of that and more of reshaping the world in a way that makes the most people able to improve their lives over the course of time. That seems to build a stronger society, in my opinion. This is all just opinion stuff.
That's kind of true. But as a company that's based in America and manufactures in America, I understand there are certain pressures in unionization. I do understand that, as someone who's used to work in manufacturing myself back in the day. So what we can do now, let's throw to the show floor where we can catch up with George again. So he's with Austrian Audio, who do some really excellent contact mics for musical instruments, I understand. So let's throw to the floor now.
Hi, everybody. It's George down here in Anaheim, California at NAMM. And I could not miss Austrian Audio. I know this product really well, but many of you may not. It's a pretty new company. So I'd love to get Philip here to tell us about it. How you doing, Philip?
I'm great, thank you.
Thanks for coming out to the show, and I want to share with the story of Austrian Audio and why this microphone and this line of microphones is so amazing.
Yeah, it's great, and it's really great to be here. And Austrian Audio just exists for 5 years, but we are all in the industry for much longer because there was a Vienna-based microphone company that closed its door 2017. And as this happened, we founded Austrian Audio. So we are roughly 50 people now in Vienna working for Austrian Audio, and 45 out of those have worked with the other microphone company. So
the other Austrian microphone company.
Yeah, not mentioning the name. I would say we are a startup with 500 years of experience. So, and then we said, we took over the people, but we couldn't take over the products. So we started at the real core, and this was the large condenser capsule, CK12, brass version. Everybody loves it, everybody knows it. Back in the days, it was a real big thing, but it was always very terrible to manufacture. And so we said we're not going to create another knockoff. You can buy knockoffs of that capsule each and everywhere. We're going to do a new version, and we did a new version. It actually has a ceramic ring instead of this brass ring. Helps a lot. Ceramic is very stiff, also very flat. You don't need to grind it.
It's not affected by temperature variations, right?
It's not affected by temperature, and most of all, it's not conductive, so you don't get into any problems with humidity. This capsule works in all our large condenser microphones. The OC818 with the dual membrane, the OC18 that has the cardioid pattern, and that's new at the show here, this is why we're standing here, the OC16. So the other two microphones, OC818 and OC18, they are really professional gear, and we understand that professional gear is not for everybody. On the cost side, everybody loves it. Everybody would like to have.
Special goes for everybody. Just the budget is the issue.
The budget is the issue. An OC18 retails still for above $800. We understand that's impossible for some aspirational musicians, content producers to acquire. So what did we do? We stripped on the electronics a bit. We stripped on the mechanics a bit, made it all a little bit simpler, gave it a simpler shock mount. We kept the Vienna-made capsule. So this is our new product here, retails for $399, the OC16, and that's a very attractive offer for the aspirational musician.
And the first thing I noticed, because my audience personally is podcasters and voiceover people, is the fact that you did keep what I think is the most important switch on a microphone, the variable high-pass filter. So brilliant, because we have to get rid of the rumble in all of our home studios.
Exactly. And what I always say is I think it's very important to get good gear into younger people's hands. Because if somebody is buying his first large condenser microphone and it's rubbish, and he says, oh, why would I use that? That even sounds barely better than my NAMM microphone. This guy will never buy another large condenser anymore. If I get him good gear in the first place, if 5 years later he requires all the cardioid patterns, want to play around with the polar designer and our other cool features, I hope he's coming back to us. Let's take a look at the OC18 and 18 as well. So I'm just moving here, hoping to not get out of the angle. Yeah, I'm here. The OC18, that's the cardioid only version. It has already a pad in here. What I say about the pad on our high-class microphones, they really reduce the voltage on the capsule. This helps a lot because then actually the capsule is less sensitive, and it's not just for not overriding your input, but it really helps you to bring the sensitivity a bit down so that you get over those 150 dB that we sometimes require. And the flagship product is obviously the OC818 over there. And the OC818 has all those nice features. Let me take that here. All the polar patterns that you can choose. You can even hook up a Bluetooth remote to this product. Then you can steer it from your smartphone. You can program a polar pattern of your own into the product. You have also the high-pass filter and the pad on that one. And you could also route out the back capsule from the microphone to your recording console. You record 2 channels, and then you can do in post-production choose which polar pattern you want to use. It's very handy because we know that, especially in professional environments, artists don't have too many time, so you really need to rush the recording. You might have a little bit of time afterwards to figure out, oh, okay, yeah, I need this and that polar pattern. With our plugin, you can even decide in which frequency range you want which polar pattern, which is very nice. Oh, it's a great recording, but I have a little bit of bleeding from the snare in this area. Yeah, then you take this frequency and you go to cardioid in that. Omni for the rest, because the room sounded great. Helps a lot with production.
I see the interface over here on this iPad. So this is the software that is talking to the microphone via Bluetooth.
No, that's the software that you would use if you route out the second output.
Gotcha. So this is what will, when we take both capsules, send it into the computer, we can go through this polar designer and get amazing granular control over how the polar patterns behave.
Exactly. And for the Bluetooth remote, this would look like that. That's actually the... And there you can steer the pattern from your smartphone. Very handy if the microphone is, for example, set up over a drum kit or in a church over the chorus, for example. So that's very, very helpful in some situations.
You can steer the polar pattern away from another instrument that might be bleeding.
Exactly. For example, yeah.
Or in the case of a voiceover booth, sometimes there's a big glass window just to the right of the artist, voiceover, and you want to get that glass out of the microphone. Yeah. We can steer the pattern steer the glass out of the microphone.
Yeah, would say okay, then use more cardioid or less. Yeah, so you have really great options with that microphone.
That's brilliant. Well, I'm a big fan, so I'm a little bit biased. We're going to walk into the frame here. I'm a little bit biased, obviously. I will be clear about that. The Austrian Audio Microphone Company supports my podcast, the Pro Audio Suite. So there's some bias there, folks. But honestly, this is an incredibly innovative product. We know it very well. Sound quality is absolutely without parallel. And I got to tell you, it's worth trying. And that's why I wanted to come here and talk to them, because I'm really impressed with it. So I appreciate your time today, Philip.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Let's go back to the studio.
It's excellent to see there. I really do like the dual diaphragm design to the microphones as well. So there's a couple of brands out there. So the Sennheiser Twin is a very famous one. So what it allows you to record down to 2 tracks. So you're recording the microphone onto 2 tracks, and then afterwards you can actually manipulate those 2 tracks to bring up different polar patterns. They've got software that allows you to do it in the box, but you can actually do it in an analog mixer as well by just changing polarity, and those kind of things allows you to bring up the different polar patterns, which is pretty cool to see. So those kind of things where we actually can speak to the manufacturers there. And the fact that Austrian Audio does actually have some very interesting solutions to different types of microphones, especially I like their instrument microphones that they actually have. They have an active dynamic microphone, so you may want to check that out on the website. So as you just heard me right, so it's active and it's dynamic, so it's a pretty cool thing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Could you use it in a figure 8 to use it as a part of an MS setup with a cardioid or supercardioid in conjunction?
Yeah, so that dual diaphragm one they were talking about, yeah, you definitely can. And you can actually change it. So this is the same as the Sennheiser Twin. There's a few microphones that can do this where actually you can record both patterns out. It looks like they're doing it via software. And you can, of course, do it via software, but the Sennheiser Twin is designed to be done on an analog desk as well. So all you do is you change the polarity of channel number 2 or diaphragm number 2. And then you can if you bring it, change in the dB level of the second polarity, will change your cardioid shape. And by doing a complete 180 degree, so if you just change the polarity of one, not the other, that's technically going to figure 8. So exactly what you said. So that'd be the figure 8 pattern. So you can do an MS. You wouldn't be able to you can do an MS recording from the one microphone. So you can actually because you can double up. So this is where you can actually double up the signal, and you treat. So if you take the two signals and you can pump those two signals back into, so you just in the analog world, you can take the two diaphragms and put them into 4 channels. So 2 per diaphragm, and you treat one as an omni or as a wide cardioid, and treat the other one as a figure 8, and therefore you actually have MS in the one microphone. So yeah, this is where the Sennheiser Twin got its fame, was actually being put into those kind of scenarios, and we can change the polar pattern, especially in AB as well.
Even when the diaphragms are 180 degrees out of phase rather than 90?
So that's not a problem as long as you have the diaphragms set up for figure 8. So you want to have those diaphragms set up for figure 8. You can put it into omni for one, so you can use an omni for MS as well. So you can go omni for one, it wouldn't matter which direction it is, and then you go figure 8 for the other one. So your MS, so you can do your M signal, you put into omni pattern as far as the diaphragms are concerned, and then you take the exact same signal out and go into channel 3 and channel 4 essentially, and just reverse the polarity of the other channel, and that'll allow you to give the your S part, which is your side part, which would be the figure 8. So you can, but you'd have to use an omni. You're right, because cardioid would only work from the side, but omni would work.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Are they stacked, or is one diaphragm in front of the other? I can't.
So just a little quick. So all large diaphragm microphones that have the ability to change their pattern via a switch on it, they're all dual diaphragm. They have 2 diaphragms that are essentially the same. So because those 2 diaphragms are the same and they point in 180 degrees, and sometimes they're fixed, so you'll have a single diaphragm one, and a single diaphragm can do cardioid, omni, but that's a very different thing. I won't get into that. But you can do cardioid. If you have a dual diaphragm, you can either do figure 8, and it can be fixed to a figure 8 if that's the case. But you can also have ones that can change a polar pattern, which is usually omni, cardioid, and figure 8. That's usually the 3 you get to choose. And essentially, when you go to omni, what it really is, it's just a dual cardioid. So it's a cardioid looking one way and a cardioid looking the other way. By adding the 2 together, you get essentially an omnidirectional microphone. You don't get the same frequency response as a true omni, but I won't get into that. It's a bit more involved. But you do get the pattern, the pickup pattern similar to an omni. Figure 8 is when the polarity is opposite to each, so therefore you actually get more of a lobe, a pinch in the center at 90 degrees off axis. And then a cardioid, you're actually just taking down the volume of one, and so essentially just running one diaphragm for cardioid. So that's how you kind of get a cardioid. And by bringing up the other volume of the other diaphragm, essentially, you're going to a more of a wide cardioid and a hypercardioid as well. So it's quite interesting when you actually can play with the dual diaphragms after the fact, after you've recorded, rather than setting on the actual microphone itself when you're recording. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the idea of MS in general, is that you can change the width, the stereo width of a stereo recording. But I'm more interested in, can you explain this active dynamic situation? What is that about?
What I'll do is I'll bring it up. We'll go to Bill Davis first, and while Bill's talking, I'll bring up the information to read directly from the website to find out exactly how they're doing the active and see if it's as similar to some other brands. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I wonder if how do you apply bias voltage to a dynamic microphones? Yeah, it'd be interesting. No, my question was more about, I'm still having a little bit of trouble with this, and I guess it's because I come to this not as a musical recordist, but as a voiceover guy who does that. You know, if the voice is coming in from one side of a dual diaphragm capsule, and I'm addressing it from one side, I've always been confused as to how the signal hits the other side without bouncing around the room and coming in either out of phase or something. But I can see it for a microphone at distance that's trying to do an image of an orchestra or something like that. That makes sense. It's my focus on, I always address mics directly. That's been my thinking. And so one diaphragm behind the other, I can't figure out how the second one wouldn't be lesser than the first one in a way that messes things up. But it's just my bad thinking, I think.
And so checking out the website to find out what the active is. So essentially what they've got is a very, very high quality cloud lifter built into the microphone. So the long cable runs, they can run in higher dB. So that's what they're doing, but they can also do a dynamic high pass filter. So essentially how a high filter. So essentially what it means is that when you have long cable runs, you have resistance to your audio signal, and that's actually going to lower your high end. So what they're doing is they're pumping the high end as well based on the resistance they're feeling from the actual circuitry, because they know how long your cable is because they can tell by the voltage drop in the phantom power. So it's pretty clever how they're doing it. So essentially it's having a very high quality cloud booster in the microphone so you can do long cable runs, and so you don't have to hit the preamp as hard when you get to the other end. So that's something that we find out a lot.
Right. So it's basically an internal preamp.
Dual FET preamps on each one on each capsule.
Excellent. So we got the guys on the floor out there in Anaheim are ready to go again. So let's go over to the NAMM show floor now.
We're down at the show floor. We're getting close to NAMM show day 3 wrapping up here. But before we do, we got Guitar Pro 8, and Maxime Serre is here to share about what this technology is all about. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you.
Well, tell us about Guitar Pro 8. Obviously, this is performers, or is this a studio tool? Is this for learning? What do we do with Guitar Pro 8?
So Guitar Pro is a music notation software that was originally more made for guitar players, but you can also write piano, you can write drums, you can write all kind of instruments. So the tool, the software ranges from composition to transcribing to learning songs. You can basically do anything within Guitar Pro. We also have another offer that's called My Songbook, which is a library of about 3,000 full scores, arrangements, tablatures of pretty famous songs that you can download right into Guitar Pro. It's based on a subscription fee or a one-time buy for each score. And yep, that's it.
I think it's really smart to have that subscription and one-time buy option. Some folks don't like subscription. I get subscription. I understand how it continues the support of the company, so they continue supporting their product and developing, but it's great to have that flexibility. So what's the interface like? What are we looking at here?
So we are looking at multiple things in the interface. So if I want to demo a little bit of the software, here it is. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not so good with Mac. We'll just go with the video then. So we have on the interface the score part of the thing. We have the side panels that I use for notation and for sound banks choosing, pedal effects, that kind of stuff. And you also have the ability to input audio files into Guitar Pros. So for synchronization, transcribing, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's basically an overview of the new feature, which is called the pedal board. So it's a more realistic view of the pedals and the effects rack on the software. You can also add a lot of things to the score. You can add scale diagrams, chord diagrams. You can add fingering, so for piano as well as for guitar. What other options? You can have specific notation for guitars, such as the palm mute, the bends, the pinch harmonics. You have specific notation for keyboards. You have the pedals. You have the fingerings, as I said. You have drums notation. So for those who are familiar with 5, we reintroduced in 7 and also in 8 the tab notation for drums, which was something widely used, I think. And we also have the mixing panel over here. So for the different tracks, you can do your mixing, mastering to have a realistic rendering of the score you're writing.
Oh, I like that integration of a mixer. It feels more like you're mixing live music. Well, it's a great looking interface, and obviously you're on version 8, so you must have gotten something right.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, Guitar Pro benefited from being one of the first on the market, but I think it's a pretty great tool because it's fast for editing. It's widely used in it's the most used format on the internet. Notation files. You can find GP files on the Ultimate Guitar. All the platforms. Songs are even used. You have the same kind of interfaces, so I think it originated a lot of the current interfaces for music notations and things like that.
Excellent. Well, I tell you, it's really great to learn something new about this product. I feel like you guys have struck a chord, so to speak, because having your standard file format become something that a lot of people actually want to see is a pretty big deal. I mean, it's that fact that people can see this and use this file format among. Let me get to our questions, because we should have some questions throwing to us from the studio. No questions today, so we'll call that a wrap. Thanks again,
Okay.
Philip.
Thanks so much.
My
Have a good
pleasure.
day, guys.
Back to you guys in the studio.
See you.
Thanks, George. So it looks pretty cool how you can do what you can do in that software as far as notation and tab, and actually adding in a rhythm section as well, and a rhythm and bass as well. So it looks pretty cool what the software is capable of, especially for people learning guitar. I think when I was learning guitar many moons ago, that kind of software would have been very helpful to actually play along, put my audio file in, and follow and see where I'm differing from the what's actually transcribed. It's pretty cool stuff. So if there's any other things that our panelists would like to talk about, we can, and we will go back to the field when they're available next. That kind of software, I think, is really interesting with bedroom producers. So where they're able to actually build an entire track and actually put in their own audio file and see it against the score, against the transcription, is actually a really interesting thing for bedroom producers to actually create nearly complete tracks now that are pretty much they can actually put them up, on iTunes via CD Baby and have their own releases, which is quite interesting. We're seeing this a lot too with beat makers as well. So people doing more EDM kind of music, that's been happening since the dawn of time, pretty much. That there have been bedroom producers for EDM, but it's quite interesting to see how the technology is actually helping people either learn the instrument and collaborate as well, and actually get completed songs out into the world. Any other comments from the panelists? Go ahead.
I was just trying to wrap my head around exactly what that product did, but looking at its website, so it converts a printed score or a notation directly to sounds, or does it allow you to add sounds to a notated track? I got the impression that it had wave samples of guitars and bass, etc., built into it, and it would actually synthesize the guitar tracks from the score itself. Is that what it's doing?
Yeah, it's a mixture of two. You can put in your own audio file, and it looks and then right, and then essentially you can put in notation, and then from that notation, it can actually essentially play out a MIDI version of a guitar. You're correct, but it'll put the dynamics in, so slides and stuff, which is actually quite hard to program into MIDI. So it looks like it actually can read the notation and know when to do a slide or when to do a bend, and those things are a little bit harder to just play MIDI. Well, for MIDI to know just by putting in notation, but if you can understand the tab, that's pretty cool. Go ahead, Greg.
But will it? Can you play an audio? Can you play for instance, a guitar track into it, and it'll notate it for you?
That would be quite interesting to see. I didn't see if that. I didn't actually. I'm looking at the website too. I can't see.
That's what I thought it was doing. But Courtney,
actually
apparently
there's
there's
opposite of that, right? So
yeah. Well, I guess that's what we're finding out.
Should be able to go both ways.
It is interesting. Yeah, because their website.
That would be a huge boon for guitar players, because keyboard players can play stuff on the keyboard, and it'll transcribe to MIDI, which is pretty easy. But without a fairly expensive guitar setup, that's really not possible for guitar players.
The only way I know it is available for guitar is Roland. So Roland and Boss, they both have their little pickup you can put on. You don't have to play from that pickup, so you can play naturally, but that pickup, it knows which string you're playing and which note you're playing on that string. So it can actually create tab or notation from the pickup from the GK series, which Roland has had since the late 70s. But rather than using it as a way to pick up and play a synthesizer, which is the way Roland thought of it, you can actually just bring it in and just create MIDI notes from it into your DAW. So that is the one way, but you do have to buy extra equipment to put on your guitar or buy a guitar.
Yeah, and doesn't that require like a multi-pin output cable and all that stuff?
It requires the GK. So the GK is a pickup, and it has usually a box of some sort. So usually there's a stomp box.
Right.
It will work through their synthesizers, but they actually will also have a guitar processor that also has it. And Boss, the stomp box pedal company, they actually released a guitar.
So there is a Boss guitar that has this all built in. So that's actually quite an amazing guitar in itself. It's a relatively expensive guitar. But yeah, so there is a Boss guitar now to go with our Boss pedals, which has this technology built into it. And it's a very elegant solution because it's rather than just adding something, clipping something onto the front of the electric guitar or an acoustic guitar, you can actually do it at the bridge of an acoustic guitar as well. This actually has it all built in. It's a very slick guitar, but you are right. There is the solution to it, but you'll need to have this extra cable coming out. And it goes into a box of some sort, which is your stomp box, and then that actually can be sent to via, depending on which one you get, via USB to a computer, and it'll actually send out the MIDI notes. And if you get some of the bigger ones, so they're larger synthesized ones, they can actually have MIDI pass through. So the cool thing is that you can actually play the guitar, you can actually have MIDI going out and actually playing a keyboard. So you can actually have your guitar playing a keyboard while you're actually playing guitar as well. And you can say, I only want this string to play the keyboard. I want these 5 strings to play on the guitar. So you can send your low E to go to a Moog.
Right.
So there is so I've seen that done. It is quite powerful. So why not now go back to the floor and see which company the guys are speaking to this time? So back to Anaheim.
Well, I hate to say it, but this is probably going to be the end for our live coverage here at NAMM because we're almost out of time. So I'm really lucky we got to slip in a meetup with Warm Audio's Matt Desolate. How you doing today?
I'm awesome, man. Yeah, psyched to be the closer. Sorry to see that you have to stop, but, let's talk some cool gear. Yeah.
Well, I know your gear enough to know that I wanted to see the microphones. My audience is all voiceover actors, so for me personally, it's all about the microphone. After the acoustics, of course, gotta get the acoustics. But once you get that sorted, the microphone is the big thing. And you guys are doing something unique in that you're recreating these legends in an accessible way. Tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, so, Warm Audio, our whole goal is to make legendary sound accessible. So one of the barriers to entry sometimes for professional recordings, whether it be voiceover or music, is how costly some of the equipment can be, right? And we don't necessarily think that it's fair that you should have to spend a ton of money to learn and to sound good because, the talent may be there and certainly the drive is. So that's what we do. We make legendary recreations of famous microphones, outboard gear, including preamps, compressors, EQs, and we're just getting started. It's kind of the way we feel.
And you have a lot to show, but we're going to focus on just a few items right here with 4 microphones and a 4-channel preamp to go with it, actually. So let's just start my side and work our way across and tell us about each microphone. Give us a minute on each one.
Sure. So first up, we have the WA87. This is probably the most legendary vocal microphone of all time. So many hit records and hit songs have been done on the original 87 style microphone. So when we set out to make our take and our version on the microphone, we wanted to make sure that we studied some of the more famous older microphones that have stayed around at recording studios around the world. So we sent it out to artists and engineers. We actually had a first version of the microphone years ago, and we made some tweaks based on feedback, and we really think we've nailed the sound. It's a fairly present microphone. It really brings out high end in a really pleasing way, and sometimes it just adds that little polish that you need to go from sort of, I think this sounds okay, to like a very professional sounding recording.
So it's an R2, so you had one out and then you refined it. You did a revision, and the revision was to bring the mic more towards the classic end of that microphone's heritage?
Yeah, I think one thing that can be a challenge when we have microphones, we go into studios and we listen, is we end up finding that old microphones have a different sound than some of the ones we can buy today, or even some of the ones reissued by those companies. So we wanted to hone in on what makes an old 87 great and then try and reproduce that as well as possible. So we're super excited about that.
This one is really interesting because talk about a mic that's out of reach for almost anybody but professional studios. The one that this one's reminiscent of. Tell us about this special microphone.
Yeah, so our WA8000, I actually am fortunate enough to have experience with the original microphone that we're sort of nodding to. And you mentioned voiceover artists. This is actually a sneaky, excellent voiceover microphone because of all of the detail. Original microphones, original productions from the 90s will run you Toyota Corolla prices. And then if you can find one new for purchase today, you're still talking used car price. So this is a really, really accessible way to get into very high fidelity recording, some of the most signature pop sounds that you can think of from folks like Mariah Carey, Bon Jovi, and then in the R&B rap and hip hop community, you've got Dre, you've got Eminem, you've got Drake. The list goes on and on and on. So people like to say crispy, not my favorite word, but this microphone has all of that top end presence that sort of lets your voice sit on top of whatever it's trying to do.
Well, I know there's at least one question from the field, but before we throw there, give us a quickie on these last two. 251 is another mic that's aspirational. When I see that number, and I know the sound of that mic is incredible, what's going on here that makes this special?
Yeah, it's fitting that we kind of group these two together because they're cousins. So while we released the 251 first in the Warm Audio history, the CX12 is brand new for NAMM. It's actually the first microphone that would come out. So they share the same capsule. It's our CK12 style capsule. 251 nods to an old microphone famously made in Germany. And I think comparing the two, the 251 may sound a little warmer at times, a little darker, maybe a little bit more low mid presence. It's become our 251 microphone is starting to get very popular in recording studios, especially in Nashville. People are loving it on everything from vocals, acoustic guitar cabs far away, room microphones. The CX12 we're super proud of because this is another microphone where there's a specific production run from the 50s to the 60s that really launched the first group. We got a chance to get the mic in front of engineers who have experience with those microphones, the good ones, as we like to say, and we think we nailed it. So we're super pumped about these two. A little bit more warm, a little more analog than the other mics we just talked about, but all really great choices depending on the application.
It's a great lineup. And then your preamp you're running for the demo here, does a preamp more about clean pre, or is it more about character? What's your preamp all about, the WA412?
Yeah, so good question. So when you say character, some people like to use coloration. When you compare it to, like, say, an interface preamp, tons more character off the bat, full stop. Compared to some of the other preamps we make, however, our 12 style preamps in this 412 version where you get 4 channels has more clean headroom. It's based on an American style console pre that became really popular in the 70s, that Chicago sound. Some of those who will know. This one has a little bit more punch, you kind of feel it a little bit more coming through the speakers. Again, compared to your interface preamp, a lot more character, but a little cleaner than maybe a 73 style pre that we also make.
Excellent, man. Well, we do actually have a question because, again, we are live. So let's grab that question. They're going to give it to me in my ear. I'm listening.
So I'm wondering, is there any chance of Warm Audio doing a version of the Neumann M50? Neumann M50.
What? Amazingly, we actually got him on comm, so Matt can take the question directly. Would you repeat it one more time for Matt?
Hey, Matt, it's Carl here. I'm just wondering, is there any chance of Warm Audio in the future doing a version of the Neumann M50, which was heavily used in orchestras? It's an Omni mic used in orchestras.
Oh yeah, no, I'm familiar. So we are always looking. We are always looking. We're always thinking about this. I promise you. I'm new to Warm. I've joined in less than a year. I walked in the door with so many questions. I had a list. I had an Excel sheet of gear I wanted us to make. And I can promise you that the people working on products here with me are just as excited as you. It's not on the immediate roadmap, but always keep an eye out on what we're doing.
Do you guys take a suggestions list on your website? Not that you don't have enough internally, right? You're already thinking about hundreds of mics, I'm sure. You know what I mean? So
yeah. So actually, the best way this is not a plug, but if you follow us on Instagram, especially, we like to ask the question a lot. We put out some funny memes every now and then, and we get the comments that flood through. We've been asked for consoles. We've been asked for interfaces. We've been asked for channel strips. I mean, just keep those coming because we love to hear them, and we actually do listen. We pay attention.
And that's at Warm Audio.
Man, I hope so. I'm not the social media guy, but I hope we own at Warm Audio or else some weird. Yeah, you'll find us. It'll be very obvious. Our logo is our profile picture. So.
That bright orange logo, hard to miss.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Man, what a cool way to wrap up NAMM. I'm glad you could be there for us. Any more questions from the studio?
It looks like that was the only question we've got so far.
Oh. All right. Well, then I think we can clear
we have
out.
One from Courtney. Sorry.
Oh, they're slipping one in, Courtney.
We actually have one from Courtney.
Do any of your doppelganger microphones there use tubes internally, or are they all FET preamps in there that are creating the interface for all of those?
We glazed over that. Yeah. They definitely have some tubes, right?
Oh,
Which of these are the tube mics?
Yeah, so we have both tube and FET. So I kind of think about three little areas for mics. You have tube, you have transformer and FET, and you have FET transformerless. We actually make mics in each. In this row, we have the 87 is an FET transformer. This is a tube, and tube. But we do have both. We use varying tubes depending on the mic. We don't go with one company. We literally hand select and test the tube based on the circuit. So I like doppelganger mic too. I'm going to start using that.
This one has a very unique feature. If I tilt, can I tilt this without causing?
Stands are finicky but strong.
Got it. There's a view. You're not going to see that on a lot of microphones. This is a heat sink, right? So is the tube actually inside that heat sink?
Yeah, the tube has to live in that heatsink. So the funny thing about tubes is depending on the circuit, it can, essentially suck power consistently, inconsistently. And with this particular circuit design, what happens is if you don't actually regulate that heat, you can blow the tubes quickly. And even some of the original models, they have trouble with that. So having the heat sink is really important because once you get the tube operating at the optimal temperature, it gives you the performance from the mic that you expect. So it's a very funny little engineering thing. It does get hot, it gets warm. So you got to watch it in the studio, turn it off when you're not using it. But yeah, it's really cool.
I think we got one more for you, actually. Let's take a listen.
So this one is from Douglas Carmichaels. He's asking if the 273 preamp is any good to put through like a synthesizer or a groove box to add saturation to the sound.
Yeah. So our 273 style preamps, we have a ton of users who will run their final mixes through them. They'll run a little kind of at-home mastering. They'll run synths, keyboards. Keyboard players, Nord players love to run those for a little extra analog color and tone. So long answer is yes. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think that's going to do it. Matt, thanks so much for helping us wrap out NAMM. It's just been a blast for us, and it's so cool to see you guys here too. Thanks so much for your time, man.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great show, and we're happy to be here. So,
back to you guys.
That's great to get an update there from Warm Audio. So, their mics are actually pretty great for the price, and as I say, they're inspirations of the original mics. Some mics that aren't made anymore, and some mics that are out of essentially out of the price range of some people, like the Sony microphone, which is $10,000. So brand new, and the ones from the 90s, yeah, right, they're like a brand new Model 3 Tesla, essentially. If you want one of those, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say the Sony's still in the market. The C800, $10,700 is the current price from B&H. So yeah, they costs a few bucks if you want to play up there.
So we're talking orders of magnitude less. Which is good. That's good.
Last time I saw one of those, Lady Gaga was singing into it, or was it? Yeah, I think it was Lady Gaga. You got that kind of money, you're fine with dropping 10 grand on your vocal mic.
Well, that's the funny thing. So some studios will actually set themselves up around these pieces. So they'll actually, some studios will actually have, okay, I've got a U87, I've got a G800. So they've got these mics and they put that front and center onto what their studio can offer to an artist, and producers and artists will go, well, this studio's got this, and their studio time is much less than the bigger studios that have the same equipment. Let's go there. So because essentially an artist may just be looking for equipment and studio time. That's it. That's kind of what they're interested in, or the producer for that song may be looking at that essentially. And the artist may have a rider that says, I only want to sing into this kind of microphone. And if a producer can find a studio that has that. So I know a lot of studios actually set themselves up with not having the most equipment, but they focus putting their resources into having certain types of equipment that is actually on some artist riders. That's the thing I know. So let's go to the next question, Bill.
Looks like Tommy Chance, and I was hoping this one would come up from St. Paul, Minnesota. And this is an important one. I don't know if we're going to get an answer, but it's a great question. What's the best swag giveaway you've seen on the show floor so far? That was part of the charm.
This would be a question we can give to our field team. Maybe if we can get our field team back on for 2 seconds before we wrap the show up, it'd be good to hear from them to find out what the best thing is they've gotten. So well, hopefully we can hear from them before we go. But as far as today coverage was concerned, it was a pretty good day. We've actually got a lot of lot of different types of stuff to come through as well, that we've actually got a lot of microphones, which is good to see, because that's always a big topic here on Office Hours, is what microphones we're using and what type of preamps as well. And it's also good to see some information coming in from SSL, which is always one of the bigger players in the audio industry as far as professional audio is concerned as well. So, which is really cool to see. For any people that are in the back, as far as listening to Office Hours here with the NAMM live show, we'd just like to thank you for all the time that you've put into watching us over the last 2 days. I'd like to also thank all the back end team that's actually been pressing all the buttons to make sure that our live stream here and live stream from the field has been coming to you. It sounds, everything is sounding really cool from our end as far as what we're getting. And now it looks like we got our team in the field. We'll be able to cross to them and actually hear from them. So the first question was, guys, swag bags. People want to know swag bags. Anything?
I haven't seen any yet. I mean, we got some earplugs. What was it from DBA?
DPA gave us some earplugs. We have a stylus.
We got pens from, somebody.
Not big on swag, but I think we've also not been sniffing it out, because we've kind of been in this intense get it done kind of mentality. So maybe after this, we'll take a breather, maybe take an hour to walk this hall that we literally scratched the surface. I mean, we saw 4 vendors along one wall. Didn't even barely touch this hall. So we might take a little time for ourselves and sniff out some more swag.
Yeah, it was like we were running with a flat tire for the first part of the day, getting the tech sorted. That's the trial and error of what this project is. But yeah, we're hoping to do a few more booths here, but that's it for time today. But I think hopefully we got some good stuff in.
Yeah, it was a blast.
We absolutely did.
Meeting that musician, the pianist, whose name is leaked.
Joseph?
Yes, Joseph Rudess from Dream Theater. I know that band. I know that band from college days. And to meet the musician, one of the founders of that band, who I didn't know who he was until that exact moment. And, we had all that prep trying and troubleshooting and retaking, and the tension was like building. And it was such a crazy moment for me personally. But the fact that we got that done, I know you didn't see the whole thing live. We've got a great package that I hope we can get up on out to see for everybody to see in the next couple of days, that we shot of a live jam session in our booth. That was the coolest thing ever. But anyway, I don't know what else to say, but we should let you guys wrap it out. From NAMM Show in Anaheim, thanks so much for being here with us.
And I want to thank the field team for all the great work they've done. And I know they will check out more of the booths later on today and make some more video packages. But great work from them. And to all our people in the background, as I said, all the people working in the background here, excellent work from them as well. All the people who have been controlling all the kind of systems that we need to use to run this kind of show, to bring it out to you onto YouTube, is very important that they've done all their jobs. And it's actually really great to see that the hard work has actually paid off over the last 2 days. And especially I want to thank all of our Mukana producers out there. So all our viewers sticking with us over the last 2 days and keeping up with all the information that we've been trying to get to you from the NAMM floor live from Anaheim. It's been a real fun ride to actually get all this information out to you live, and being able to get your questions to be seen by the manufacturers on the show floor live as well. So once again, thank you to everyone who has been involved with this process, and we hope to see you again next year for NAMM 2023.
Don't forget Cinegear next week, and WWDC in between. Big week on Office Hour.
One time only, June, right? The reality was, do we wait and go for 23? I mean, that was really, and these are decisions made last summer, basically. Prior to Delta, prior to Omicron, these were changing quickly. Maybe just at the hint of Delta. But that was the question, do we just skip 22, call it a gap year? And no one in our organization or on our board felt that that was a good idea. As an industry, to not even connect or gather for another full year. We just didn't see that as productive for anybody or any part of our mission, which is more music makers, more of a robust industry. So January did not look good once we understood more about the variants and how they were, spreading quickly, especially in our show, which is so international. And we depend on that global free travel of global industry members. So trying to move the schedule around, look at Anaheim, they miraculously came up with some June dates for us. we'll take them. This year in particular, because of the pendulum swung from no shows at all to everybody going on tour, and that's created the challenges we were speaking of earlier about talent shortage and qualified people on the road. And obviously there's lots of issues related to that as far as just the things we got so spoiled that things just went up on time and they went on as always. Now there's maybe a new generation of people coming in, and safety, of course, is a huge issue. We're going to be addressing that at Summer NAMM. At the NAMM show in June, the idea of how do we make sure these events are safer than ever as they get more and more complicated. But at the show in June, there'll be thousands of young aspiring industry professionals. It's our Gen Next. So they're going to come for the networking, they're going to come for training. Now they may go work for a manufacturer, they may go work for one of the NAMM retailers, but many of them are going to find their path into the event technology space. And I think we're encouraging, especially this year when there's just so much opportunity for them. Someone coming out of college, someone coming out of maybe their theater program where they had experience of being on stage or working on those skills. I think if I were in this industry, I would be at the June show recruiting. I would be there absolutely looking for the next generation of talent because we need them. So it's almost like a job fair. What's the next couple years going to look like? And I don't know anyone who can tell me with any certainty that answer. And I think the list of things we don't know is twice as long as the things we do know. Pandemic, are we over? What's it look like? Are there more shoes to drop? What does the industry look like? Now we're in an era of inflation, high gas, and geopolitical changes. We've just experienced maybe 20 years of the most peaceful globalization we've ever had. Does that change? How does that change touring? How does that change the free flow of musical instruments and sound gear between manufacturer and retailer, distributor around the world? There's a lot we don't know.